Apparently they are having too much fun over there. So, all righty then. I will call to order this joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for this Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. And with that, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Rivers.
Here.
Councilmember Lemus.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sparks.
Here.
Mayor Harvey.
Here. Thank you for that. And then would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you for that. And we will move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda item. It is an action item. Are there any questions or changes to the minutes for April 25th? Not seeing any. Okay. Then I will open this up for public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on the minutes for April 25th? I'm not seeing anyone run up to the podium. Kevin, would you like to check our Zoom attendees?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment on approval of the minutes, please use the raise hand icon at this time. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Thank you so much. Then I will bring it back and be looking for a motion for the minutes of April 25th.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? Not seeing any, then that passes unanimously. And we will move on to the next item, which is announcements. Meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the media agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizens' business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposely biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, the maintenance of our streets, parks, and city buildings. See details on the web at cotaticity.org. Next, citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nixle by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or Android App Store, or by texting your zip code, which is 94931, to 888777. Last, like always, we love to hear from you, so please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or info@cotaticity.org. If you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can contact us at 707-792-4611, and of course, if you have an emergency, please contact 911. Continue to look for updates on the city's website and social media channels available on Facebook, Instagram, and Nixle. So with that, we will move on to the next item, which is proclamations. And the first what we have is proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati declaring May 23rd as Bike to Work Month. I believe that we do have Eris here from the Bicycle Coalition. I will read this to you. It's a long one. Proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati declaring May 23rd as Bike to Work Month. whereas the bicycle is a healthy, convenient, financially and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent tool for recreation and enjoyment of Sonoma County's scenic beauty, local attractions, and friendly neighborhoods. And whereas Sonoma County's roads and trails attract bicyclists each year, providing economic, health, transportation, tourism, and scenic benefits. And whereas creating a bicycle-friendly community has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, growing the economy of Sonoma County, attracting tourism dollars, improving traffic safety, supporting student health and learning, and reducing pollution, congestion, and wear and tear on our streets and roads. And whereas since 2001, the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition has been promoting bicycling for transportation and recreation through education, encouragement, and advocacy. And whereas thousands of Sonoma County school children have received classroom instruction in bicycle and pedestrian safety and participated in skill-building bike rodeos facilitated by the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition Safe Routes to School program. And whereas the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition's Smart Cycling program has taught bicycle safety skills to thousands of adults, including a diversion program for recipients of cycling-related traffic citations. And whereas the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition has produced numerous events and activities encouraging residents to ride a bicycle, including bike expos, cyclovias, bike film nights, bike swap meets, community rides, giveaways of bicycles and bicycle safety equipment, repair clinics, and Bike to Work Month. And whereas Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, the League of American Bicyclists, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and jurisdictions throughout the Bay Area will be promoting bicycling during the month of May 2023. And whereas throughout the month of May, the residents of Cotati and its visitors can experience the joys of bicycling through free education programs, challenges, and events organized by these groups. And whereas these groups are also promoting greater public awareness of bicycle operation and safety education in an effort to reduce collisions, injuries, and fatalities and improve health and safety for everyone on the road. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed on this 9th day of May 2023 that the City Council of the City of Cotati does hereby recognize the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition and commends the institution for its contributions to the community. And now, therefore, be it further proclaimed that the Cotati City Council does hereby proclaim May 2023 as Bike to Work Month and May 18, 2023 as Bike to Work Day in Cotati, and urge all residents to participate in this otherwise special observance. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate how much Cotati has been involved with and supportive and engaged in Bike to Work Month throughout the years. In fact, my very first Bike to Work Month was staffing the station out here in La Plaza Park with Councilmember Ford quite a lot of years ago. I so love the compactness of Cotati, that we are truly a 15-minute city, that one can bike or walk to just about anything. But I still hear from people every day who would like to bike but are nervous about it. And so Bike Month is one of these activities that we use to try to help people give it a try. There will be an Energizer station set up in La Plaza Park in the morning on the 18th. And I am working on putting together some slow, short, family-oriented rides to start and end here in Cotati to just sort of help nurture folks who are just getting started. We had our first one a couple of weeks ago, and about 5 people showed up, but a good time was had by all. So again, thank you for this recognition, and hope to see you all out on your bike on the 18th.
And Eris, would you like a picture with
Sure.
All righty. I will always take a photo up.
Actually, want to come in front of the... All right, smile.
Congratulations. All right. Thank you for that. And then we will move on to the next item, which is approval of the final agenda. Are there any changes this evening?
No proposed changes, Mayor?
Proposed changes, okay. And are there any comments of the public on this item, approval of the final agenda? Not seeing any here. Kevin, could you check with our Zoom attendees?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment on approval of the final agenda, please use the raise hand icon at this time. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Then we will move on to our next item, which is citizens' business and public comment for the consent calendar items. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. So with that, I will open up citizens' business and comment on the consent calendar. Anyone wishing to speak citizens' business? Not seeing any. Would you like to check with our Zoom attendees?
Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment for citizens' business or the consent calendar, please use the raise hand icon at this time. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is anyone on the council wishing to pull any of the items on the consent calendar?
I don't wish to pull it, but I have a question about 9B for staff. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So just my question, probably for Craig, I noticed that the sewer plan called for us to replace the 6-inch pipe with 8-inch pipe, but since we can't get under the creek in a timely manner, we're just going to go ahead and do 6-inch pipe replacement. I just wanted to understand how that might affect things in the future. Like, will we plan to go replace it with 8-inch pipe someday, or is it sufficient for our needs into the foreseeable future?
Yeah, it would be replaced by an 8-inch in the future, and the work we're doing with this project would limit the disturbance of the newly paved road just to that section instead of going all the way up Cypress. It's a pretty big constraint to have the creek right there, and then so it's just not feasible to get it in this tight timeline that we have. So we're doing the best we can.
When would you imagine we'd want to go back and do the 8-inch pipe someday? It's not
There
urgent.
are other
It's not
priorities with
urgent.
fixing
Okay.
pipe, so we're going to get the most acute fixes right now, and so it could be 5 years
Okay.
down the road.
All right. Thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't want to pull it. I just wanted to understand. And
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't catch that earlier to ask you before the meeting.
Okay. Yes.
And I'm not sure if I need to pull or if I just have questions about E. So maybe we should pull it. Unless you want me to just ask the questions. So I don't know which.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to have a conversation about it, we probably should just pull it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I'd like to please pull E.
Okay, all right. So then we have items A through D, and item B, I will be recusing myself from voting on that item because it is near me, so I would just as soon recuse myself from that. So if I could then get a motion on. I am close to Cyprus, which is where that item is, so therefore I will be recusing myself, so, okay.
I move to approve items A, C, and D.
All in favor, oh, we need a second, sorry.
We have to do B separately because it,
motions, yeah.
okay.
We don't have to, right?
Oh,
You don't have to do it separately. You can vote on the entire consent calendar with the indication that you are recusing yourself on B.
Okay,
And
all
we'll note that in the minutes.
okay.
right, so you
Move to
want to
approve
go,
items A through D.
Second?
all right, so I will, let's do a roll call vote. This will probably be easier for this. Kevin, sorry.
Councilmember Rivers,
Aye.
Councilmember Lemus,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sparks,
Yes.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes for A, C, and D, and recuse myself for item B. So with that, we will move to item E, and could we get a staff report then?
Yeah, would you like a staff report, or do you just
Or
want to ask
do you
some
just-
questions about it?
Would you want him to go through a staff report, or do you just have questions that you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I just had three, what I think are quick questions. One is, when I just compared the amount that we're offering, so first, just to make sure I understand, this is for young, or not necessarily young, but new police officers that are going to the academy, and we want to bring them on and sponsor that education so that they are in line to come on to police staff. That part's correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
Okay, so then the one thing I just wanted to ask is, considering these are actually, people in school and not actually working for the city yet, I'm wondering why there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 12 different positions that are actually paid less than a student. And I wonder if it wouldn't be reasonable for the student for people who are working here to not be paid less than someone who is going to school to work here in the future.
So the police officer bottom step is step A. And so Damien and I have looked at other cities and what they're doing. And this is normally what they do is, because they're not a police officer yet, and because they do not have the police academy yet, that they are not paid the full police officer wage.
Right. I
Is
guess
that the question?
No, that's sort of the opposite of what I'm asking. Is like, so for example, the police dispatcher is less, an office assistant
Oh,
is
okay.
less, an account clerk is less, like, I'm just,
Sorry.
Yeah.
I understand now, yeah. So police officers make more than dispatchers. So every year, or not every year, but every time there's a new MOU, there's a comparison of cities similar to Cotati, and that's where the salary ranges come from. But at any police agencies, a police officer makes more than, for example, a police dispatcher.
okay.
There's more, it's dangerous, there's more training. It's just a very different job, and that's why it pays more.
Okay.
And I will say too, when the chief and I were researching this to set this up, many other cities do this, and it's the common practice sort of across the board is it's about your A step is your starting your entry level police salary step.
Right.
So the very common practice we saw across all the different agencies was that it was about 20% under the starting step is what they paid for the trainee in the
Okay.
academy.
So maybe we just need to raise what everyone else is paid, okay. And then my second question was about representation. Is there a reason they're not going to be represented?
Yeah, I can explain that.
Okay,
So because they're not going to be working the streets yet, so they technically will not be police officers until they graduate the academy.
Okay.
And then are sworn in, take the oath of office. So they don't need to be a union member at that time, and they don't have Peace Officer Bill of Rights as well. And so they won't be a member of the POA until they graduate the academy and start the field training officer program.
Okay. And then the last question, I think I've asked something similar to this as well on other hiring of both external people and also internal to the city is, I don't see anything in the, all the whereases to include something about, Spanish speaking or person of color or women or LGBT, diversity in hiring. And I just want to make sure that's in there somewhere, even if it's not in the proclamation that we make today.
Well, I mean, all the hiring has to be non-discriminatory, but there can't be. There's a very defined process for making preferences, hiring preferences. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
It is.
Yeah, so that's a different process. You have to have a business need, basically. Otherwise, you can't discriminate in your hiring.
Affirmative action is illegal? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Our city follows
it's just
California laws and federal laws.
Yeah, you can't preferentially hire one person over another unless you have a business need for it. That's just the state of the law that we follow, to my understanding at least.
Okay, can I just check with the city attorney on
that? There's a California constitutional provision, the name of which I'm forgetting, that is really restrictive in terms of basing decisions on at least racial grounds. So I'm not comfortable saying affirmative action is illegal, but it's restricted, highly restricted, and there are various limitations on what types of decisions can be made. I think, though, we can, advise that we welcome all different types of people and that kind of thing in the materials that when we solicit, people to work in Cotati. So that's the kind of thing you can indicate, but you cannot make decisions based on people's backgrounds.
And I should have said that. That is absolutely. I mean, we certainly can do that in our advertisement in terms of what the advertisement says, but also, where we seek employees. Right? We're open to wherever someone comes from, and we are in the process. This came out of the ad hoc. We're in the process of reviewing job classes, and the police officer is one of them that we're reviewing for hiring preference or desirability based on at least Spanish speaking, because that's it's a targeted.
I had that on the list.
Yeah. That's something that if provided the evaluation confirms this, then there's a business need for it. So there's a legitimate need to actually preferentially hire for that.
Okay, great. No, I just thought, that we always hear about the pipeline. Oh, we just don't have them in the pipeline, and this is exactly creating a pipeline. So, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that just from being in HR in the past, you're right with affirmative action, but there are kind of focus where you can kind of focus and do ideal characteristics of a candidate you're looking for, where you can put with ideal characteristics, maybe bilingual Spanish, that doesn't mean it's required to apply for the position, but you can add that to the job description. Let me see what else I was going to say. And also, I think a big, just to kind of some information to provide is outreach, is where your outreach is. I'm not sure where you're outreaching to try to find these candidates, but I think it also would be good to kind of target maybe some schools. I have some groups like, there's like a police officer, like Latino and Black and other kind of people of color groups that are law enforcement related, that you can kind of target some of those schools or some of those groups, just to kind of get more diversity in the pool, the candidate pool.
I had a question since we pulled it. Is there any provision to ensure that the candidate who goes through the trainee job for whatever period of time, do they then have to take a job with Cotati PD, or could they go off somewhere else at the end of all of this investment?
I don't know of any legal binding contract that says we have to keep them. I mean, police officers do lateral after some time sometimes, but immediately, I don't really see that as a trend. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible.
Well, I was just reading in the report, it said that there's very few uncommitted candidates in the academy, so I'm worried that we could invest money in a candidate and then they get sniped by another department.
But our person would be committed, though.
They would be committed to us? That's what I was asking.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, they would definitely be committed to us, and if they graduate, they would get sworn in as a Cotati police officer and go through our program. Yeah, absolutely.
There'd be some contractual obligation on their part that they
Well,
have to
now
do
you're
that?
back to that. That's the question I thought you asked, and no, there's not.
So, yeah.
Not once they become a Cotati police officer, if they wanted to apply elsewhere, they could.
But they have to, I feel like you're saying both things. Yes, they have to, and no, they don't have to. Or
Yeah, I mean, we would, so like, the arrangement would be that, they'd go through the academy, they'd be a sponsored trainee. And as I understand it, this has been the subject of court cases in the past, where courts have essentially said that it's like indentured servitude to basically say that you have to work for that agency when you get out. So it would be probably not great for them to be jumping ship immediately. It's a small community. And so I think it's unlikely that they would just, like, for example, get trained by us and go to Healdsburg, because they'd make a lot of people mad and everyone would know in the small community. So it's just best practice.
Peer pressure, okay.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
it's possible, but not probable.
It doesn't really happen, is what you're saying?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I thought that there were some instances where they would have to stay for like 6 months or have to reimburse the city for the costs of school.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I thought that that's how some cities handled it. There was a period of time or you got reimbursed.
Maybe that's recruitment bonus, maybe? Maybe that's a recruitment bonus, because I know that there's recruitment bonuses are offered in other agencies.
Yeah, that's.
I know with teaching, they have that, where they sponsor you, and then you have to work for 4 years in a Title I school before you can go out, or you have to pay it back. So I know there is precedent for it, just maybe not in city. But I've seen teachers in that, and it is indentured servitude. Fundamentally, that is exactly what it is.
Yeah. So this program, we're just starting it out for the first time. We've never done this before. So we're going to just see how it goes. And if we need to adjust things along the way, we certainly will. If we find there's issues with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just one comment that in teaching, those agreements are typically forgivable loans. So they're structured as loans, so you can either leave your job and pay the loans back or stay in your job long enough to get the loans forgiven.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But the end result is the same. Yeah.
When I took my sabbatical at the junior college, I had to sign paperwork that I would agree to pay back my entire salary for that year if I didn't work a certain number of years afterwards. So I know that those types of agreements exist because I was subject to one of them.
But I think that the issue is somewhat what Sylvia brought up, and that's that a lot of the other agencies are putting out large sign-on bonuses. So this is just a way of helping get candidates and get good candidates at the academy. So since we pulled this item, any more comment on this? Then I will open this up for public comments since we pulled it. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this item? Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Would you check with Zoom attendees?
Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon at this time. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back. Then I would be looking for a motion on the addition of the police trainee job classification and related compensation item.
I'll make a motion to approve the item.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any noes? Any abstains? All right, that motion passes unanimously. And then we will move on to item 10, which is direction on future agenda items. Uh-oh, the hot seat got moved. Yes, Sylvia.
Yes, with June coming up, I want to request a proclamation for Pride Month. And so I don't know if this is the time to request it.
Got it? Okay.
I don't know if Cotati has done this in the past as well, but how about getting the progressive gay flag out front as well? Is that something we've done before?
We have not, no.
I would like to, I don't know how one goes about proposing making that happen, but I would like to see that happen.
Sure, I mean, it'll all be part of the same process. In fact, I think Councilmember Lemus asked earlier for a conversation about sort of our proclamations through the year. And it may lag it a little bit, but that would be a more comprehensive conversation, because usually when you're doing proclamations, oftentimes they come with flags of some type too, so it's a related conversation. It's not uncommon.
Okay, all righty. Then with that, we will move on to our regular agenda item, and the first item is appointment of library commissioner, and I believe that Cyan is in the audience. Would you like to come up to the podium? Cyan? You could. Oh, you don't have to say anything. Just want to introduce you to the folks, if you could come up. Cyan McMillan has applied to be our representative on the Library Commission, and he is looking to have a career in the library field. So I think that it's wonderful that he's applied and wanted to be our commissioner, and I think it'll be a good experience for him to have this this under his belt. So anything that you would like to add?
I'm just happy to be here.
Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Cyan? Sure. Not hard questions.
No, and it's actually not, can I make a comment as well? Does
Sure.
it have to be a question?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to welcome you. As soon as you get appointed, but I'm very excited to see your application. I'm on the Library Advisory Board and also the Rohnert Park Cotati Library and Education Committee, and I see you went to Credo, which I have some I know a lot of people there. I'm a high school teacher. So anyway, I just am delighted that you applied, and I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. All right. Then we will take, you may sit down if you'd like. And I will open this up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this nomination to the Library Commission in the audience? Not seeing anyone run up. Could you check on Zoom then, Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Thank you so much. Then I would be looking for a motion to approve my nomination. So,
I nominate to approve the nomination of, sorry, what am I saying? I move that we appoint Cyan as Library Commissioner.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any noes? Any abstentions? Not hearing any. Well, welcome, Cyan, and thank you for being our new library commissioner. And please let us know if you need anything from us. But we appreciate your service. All right, then, with that, we will move on to the next item, which is the NorCal Oaks Baseball and Softball License Agreement for use of the city recreation facilities. And I think Ashley's going to take this one.
Yes, I am. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Just a little bit of background. The city owns, operates, and maintains Cater Field behind City Hall here and the baseball field at Putnam Park, which include baseball fields, fencing, backstops, dugouts, bleachers, parking lots, restrooms, and a snack shack. In February 2017, Cal Ripken Babe Ruth Baseball entered into a 5-year license agreement for the field use, which required maintenance of the fields, but did not propose or require improvements. At the end of their agreement term, which was this year, they chose not to request to renew their license, so it's currently sitting empty. NorCal Oaks is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides free youth baseball and softball throughout Sonoma County to its participants. And after the agreement with Cal Ripken ended, they came in to speak with me about proposing to use our facilities as their home base. Looking for home fields, they believe it would be a perfect location to target everyone throughout Sonoma County, being the hub and all. And they would like a space to consistently hold their practices and games rather than needing to travel out of the area to play, because they currently don't have any home fields. Under the proposed agreement, the fields would be utilized by youth ages 10 to 15 and are expected to be primarily from Sonoma County, although they would not restrict that as a requirement for them to play. The proposed agreement is a 10-year agreement with the option for extension if requested by either party, and would be beneficial to the city as the fields would be put to use for a youth recreational sport and reduce city maintenance costs of the baseball portions of Cater Field and Civic Center Park at Civic Center Park and Putnam Park. There's currently about 75 players with the NorCal Oaks, and they expect that once they are able to get a home field, that they'll raise that number to 140 by the end of August, with word being spread that there's a free baseball program and softball program throughout the county, and they just gain popularity. They've also proposed to make significant changes to both fields, which would include new sod, dirt, fencing, sand, bleachers, and much more. Other potential benefits to the city would include increased visitation with potential sales tax revenue, families visiting for their weekend tournaments or practices, and return guests maybe finding a park and then wanting to have a birthday party there. In the staff, in conjunction with the NorCal Oaks, have developed a draft license agreement, which is attached to the agenda or to the packet, which would include the NorCal Oaks paying for utilities for both fields, including the snack shack and maintenance of the field, with the city maintaining the irrigation system and parking areas. The financial considerations is that they are proposing to make field improvements in this first year of $577,588 within the first year. And additionally, they would be proposing to spend $5,000 annually to the city, or pay $5,000 annually to the city for each of the 10 years in the agreement. With the Cal Ripken Baseball, we collected $1 a year just as comparison, and they did not make that amount of improvements. We expect that the anticipated impact of the budget would be positive, and they are willing to partner with us in facility maintenance and utilities. And they've also offered to partner with us to offer other recreation programs or camps if it's something that we've desired. And I do have John Titus here representing the NorCal Oaks if there's questions directly to him or to the organization about how they operate. But with that, I will take any questions.
Questions? I had a question. My question was, there's about 70 youth that are already in the group. Are they Sonoma County? Because I noticed that Mr. Titus and Hiller Sander are from Center Fell. Are they Sonoma County? I know it doesn't matter. And then in the outreach recruitment, will there be outreaching to kids in other areas? Is it like for underserved youth, or I just have questions?
All are welcome.
Okay.
So if that's something that you wanted to propose, then we can potentially add that. But right now, it's open to anybody, and primarily all current participants are Sonoma County based.
Okay.
They're just not restricting it, so you can come if you're willing to drive from San Rafael for practice. Whenever your practice is in for games, then you're welcome, as long as they have enough coaches in room.
Okay.
A bit selfishly, is it only for youth, or do they have adult programming as well?
Currently, just youth.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Titus, would you like to share anything?
Sure, if you guys have any
Sis?
questions. I mean, I'm from Roanoke Park, so.
Okay.
Hillary is actually just our lawyer that works in San Rafael.
Okay.
Or she's actually in Seattle. Our law firm is actually in San Rafael. So just to kind of give you guys a background of the NorCal Oaks, we have a very generous fundraiser that has sponsored us. He started out last year, was our first year. His son was playing baseball at a kind of a pay-to-play type thing where they were paying a couple $100 a week, about $1,000 a month for them to go play at a baseball, we call them factories up in Santa Rosa. His son wasn't getting much playing time. There were a bunch of kids on the team. The coaches were bait and switch coaches, so they hired, they promote a semi-pro baseball player or an old pro as your coach, and then next thing you know, a dad comes in and is coaching the kids, and they're not getting the coaching that they need. So his wife actually told him, don't complain, do something about it. So he went up and basically started last year. We had our first year of kids that were just 12U kids. My son was one of them at 11U. He brought them from Windsor to Petaluma, Santa Rosa, Roanoke Park, and he actually sent us all to Cooperstown for a Cooperstown tournament. We went to Cooperstown Dream Park last summer, which is a $30,000 fee just to get into the tournament. He sponsored the whole thing and ended up paying for the hotels, the flights for all the parents to get the kids out there. There was 88 teams in the tournament that we were in for that week, and we ended up finishing 8th. And when we got back, that brought more attention for kids, like, oh, wow, this is actually pretty good. His philosophy is no dad coaches. So if you have a son, you can't coach them. All our coaches are paid. So we bring in coaches. We have the head coach from Windsor, Dave Avila, who played semi-ball. We have Paul Mayo from Casa Grande, another famous coach from the area. We have Spencer Torkelson. I don't know if anybody knows who he is. We have his uncle that helps out. And so we started, basically our foundation is we go out and get the coaches first to make sure they're good coaches, have the right values, and then we bring in the kids to match them. And so we started a girls softball 12 to 14U at the same time. When we got back, there was some girls that were interested. They didn't want to play baseball. They wanted to play softball. Didn't have an outlet, or it was very expensive. A lot of the travel baseball is very expensive. You go for the weekend, it's a $2,000 weekend. And his thought was every kid should be able to play regardless of how much they make. So he started a softball program, and we're actually meeting next Monday to actually add 3 more teams, a 10U, a 12U, and a 16U girls softball to make it 4 teams, which is what we would use this field here for. It would be a dirt infield so that we could use it for softball and also baseball for the 10 and 11 and 12 U guys. And then we actually now have 3 teams in the 13U, which we would use the big field. We moved into Sonoma State when we came back. We actually redid their field, and we're using their equipment, their batting cages, stuff like that. But during baseball season, they take priority. So again, the kids kind of got shoved off to the side, and so now we're actually looking to buy a building as well to do an indoor facility for the boys during the wintertime. And then as things go on, if we get these fields here, we're also hoping maybe we can even turf them so that the people can use them, all year round, and kind of go from there. So it's been a great organization. He has a lot of wealthy friends and sponsors that come in there. The fields. All the money that we're planning on spending is already fully funded. We have it in the bank account. We just want somebody, we want to get the kids someplace to play and have them enjoy baseball until they get, the whole thing for the boys is, this is their fun time. When they get to high school, baseball changes. And so we want them to enjoy it. We want them to get good coaching, not just go out there with the dads and hit the balls and not be ready for when they get into high school and be able to compete for their things, but also, to learn baseball, love the game, and then want to play in high school. So that's kind of where we're going with this. And we're just looking for a town, a city that we can set our feet in, have our home fields, have the kids have some pride in where they live and play in front of their friends rather than travel to Manteca or Martinez or Fairfield and all these places to go and stay somebody else. We'd rather play home in front of our family and friends so that the kids can do it, enjoy it. And I think by not having the fees or anything like that, we can attract more people that typically would not be playing baseball to play baseball.
Yes, Kay.
Just quick gender question.
Yes.
If you said, the girls wanted to play softball, if a girl wanted to play baseball or
More
a
than welcome.
boy wanted to play softball.
We actually have one.
Okay.
We actually have one girl that her name's Macy. She's a 12-year-old and she wants to play baseball. She's
Okay,
actually
great.
really good.
All right, and then anyone in between?
And anyone in between, yeah.
Okay.
It's whoever, it's just typically, we accept anybody, regardless of their playing ability. We have some kids that didn't understand which hand to put the glove on, to guys that were really, really good. We call tryouts, but everybody makes the team. What we do for tryouts is to make sure that the kids are put together with their adequate skill levels so that kids don't get hurt, or one team ends up with 6 pitchers and the other team ends up with 6 catchers. We kind of try to do that for tryouts, so we call them tryouts, but we have never, we don't plan on cutting any kids. And as far as the numbers, this year, as time goes on, we've been getting probably about 2 or 3 emails or phone calls a day with people trying to add kids to the program. When are we having tryouts? When are we starting? So we're actually probably going to have a lot more teams than we anticipated up front. So we're going to have to try to expand that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you because I think this is really good for youth and our kids to have exposure to sports and arts and different things. It helps their future. So thank you very much for your group and what you're doing.
Yeah, no, thank you. We believe the same.
Likewise, thanks for partnering with the city. I'm excited to have the programs here. I just want to, you mentioned possibly turfing, by which I assume you mean artificial turfing, the fields, which doesn't seem to be contemplated in the draft agreement.
It's not in there because there's a lot more involved with testing and stuff like that to get the turf put in. So what we believed is we partnered, again, one of his contacts is the Oakland A's. So the head groundskeeper is the one that's actually going to be redoing all the fields for us. So he's going to become putting in dirt and sod, same sod that's in dirt that's down at the Oakland Coliseum. It's going to be up here. And so it's just eventually, it's depending on weather, water needs, if we need to, we're prepared to also look at, we're not opposed to turfing the fields if that's like the city and we come to an agreement like, hey, let's cut water, let's get rid of the grass, we want to go turf, then we're 100% behind that. But there's no immediate plans.
Okay. All right.
But the funding is there if we need to.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and I'm really happy that you're here. I just had a question about what are you planning to do with the Helen Putnam field, versus the Cater fields back here?
So I have a quick picture I could show you. I don't have Cater fields. We just did a kind of a real quick drawing to try to get pricing and fences.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for the improvements, but just in terms of use of the field, like what?
So it's the two different fields are 2 separate sizes. So this field over here, basically, my son played on it when he played single A for Cal Ripken. It would be what they call a 50-70 field. So it's 10, 11, and 12-year-olds with 70-foot bases, a 50-foot pitching mound. And what we would do here is it would be an all dirt infield. Without a pitching mound, with the grass outfield to allow softball to be used, and then we would bring in a portable pitching mound. And then at Putnam is where the big improvements and a lot of stuff come into play, because that's what they consider a 60-90, so it's kind of like a college or high school baseball field, 90-foot bases, 60-foot pitcher mound. It would have grass infield, grass outfield with dirt paths going around it. There it would be, we'd also have to put up a safety net to help protect the playground that's there. And then over here too, one of the things that I don't know if it's in the agreement or not, but one of the things that we were going to do here is also put in a dog park to help keep the dogs off the fields, because again, that's one of the big causes with kids playing. They dive and end up in stuff that wasn't supposed to be on the field. So we're looking at actually putting in, I know that you guys were planning on doing one or moving the one over at Putnam, but there was no immediate plans here, so that's part of the agreement as well, is to throw in a dog park out there in the outfield if that works as well.
Great.
Again, we are very fortunate to have a very wealthy a donor to help us do this, that has the heart where it wants to be, and he doesn't want to be recognized or anything out of this. It's all for the kids. So
Great.
It's just great to finally find a city that actually wants us to do it. It's been a challenge. We've looked at Rohnert Park, we've looked at Santa Rosa, where we started, and no one really wanted to invest the time or the effort into moving fields or taking them over. So this is definitely a welcome piece. He wanted to stay in Sonoma County. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to be in this hub here, and kind of, since we do mostly focus here. Like I said earlier, if you're willing to drive, we have kids. We do. Since we're at Sonoma State, we do every once in a while we'll send out an email to everybody that we know, like, hey, coaches are going to be at the batting cages at Sonoma State. If you have friends or anybody wants to come show up. And there's been kids driving from Napa, American Canyon, to come out and just play around with us out there. I don't see them driving up every day for practice or for games or anything like that, but it's good to see that at least you have the piece coming out there. And then again, we're looking to actually buy a warehouse, hopefully in Rohnert Park or Cotati. About 7,000 square feet warehouse where we can actually have indoor batting cages for the boys all year round.
Maybe
and
staff
girls.
can
Sorry.
help with that.
The kids. Kids. It's all for the kids, yes.
All right. Well, thank you. It's really wonderful that that you want to put your efforts here, and it's really wonderful that the donor that you have is, their heart is in the right spot to make sure that the kids have fun. I went through all my kids in baseball, and I know exactly what you were talking about, and I see it now with my grandsons playing baseball, and it is real different when it's the parents trying to do it, and
it's hard, and the kids, it's a challenge for the kids. They don't, sometimes you turn them off depending on the parents, and some people don't, as dads, they don't know how to coach, and
right.
Sometimes they can turn the kids off from playing baseball depending on how they act.
Yeah. And sometimes the coaches are even the hardest on their own kids.
Yes.
And then they really get stirred up.
I'm guilty. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
When I was coaching my own son, if anybody had to sit, it was my son. I didn't want anybody to look at me differently. But when this organization, all the coaches are paid, and they can't have kids on the team that they're coaching. So.
No, that's great. All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And nobody has any more questions. I will open this up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item? Not seeing anybody run up. So Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, then I would be looking for a motion for this wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'll make a motion authorizing city manager to execute the license agreement between the city of Cotati and the NorCal Oaks for use of Cater Field and Putnam Park baseball fields.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Well, it looks like we have a deal. And thank you for spending your time in Cotati. We appreciate it. Uh-oh, we have musical chairs going on over there. All righty. So the next item we have is consideration of resolution adopting the Sonoma County Vision Zero Action Plan. This must be JP. He's getting all prepared.
Thank you, Mayor Harvey, members of the council. My name is JP Harries, and I'm a senior planner with the city of Cotati. And tonight we are talking about adopting the Sonoma County Vision Zero Action Plan. And I'll add right away that Chris Barney with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority is here, as well as Laurel Chambers with the Department of Health Services, also on Zoom, and thank them for their time to be here tonight. So what is Vision Zero? Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. It was first implemented in Sweden in the 1990s and proved to be successful there, and then it is now gaining momentum throughout the country, mostly in larger cities, and I believe we might be the first county to actually do a countywide Vision Zero, but if I'm wrong on that, Laurel or Chris can correct me. What it is really it's a new vision for safety. So if traditionally we looked as traffic deaths as inevitable, and this takes the position that traffic deaths are preventable. Also, normally we would spread our dollars basically based on geographic, put some money there, put some money over here. This one says look for where there's been malinvestment or underinvestment and address those type of funding. Traditionally, we expect perfect human behavior. This one this approach realizes there is human error and we need more of a systems approach, and that includes design and other methods to address the fact that humans do make mistakes. Traditionally, we would prevent collisions. In this case, we're focused on preventing fatal and severe injury crashes. So, yes, we understand there'll be crashes, but hopefully you go to the body shop instead of the hospital, and that's the idea. Or if it's a vehicle against a pedestrian, we're identifying areas where we can slow the vehicles down, reduce those moments of conflict, or just make the pedestrian and bicycle more visible, or give them a safer place to be. And then individual responsibility enhanced through traffic stops was the old way, which has led to, in some cases, kind of an inequitable application of the law. And this is more of a collective responsibility, so that involves, well, really everybody becomes partnerships in addressing traffic safety. So just for some background, this effort was funded by a Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant, Sonoma County Transportation Authority, and the Department of Health Services were the lead. And then they put together a multidisciplinary advisory committee, it's probably about 30-some people involved, and they included all the jurisdictions, including several departments of Sonoma County, California Highway Patrol, Caltrans, MTC, which is the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, GHD, which is a engineering firm, the Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition, Daily Acts, St. Joseph Health, and Providence Hospital were some of the main people on the advisory committee. One of the first efforts was developing a data dashboard, which is in order to address these problems, to find out what are the problems and where are the problems and how severe are they. And the data dashboard, and which anybody can go to, you can look and see where accidents have occurred, the severity of the accidents, was it vehicle against vehicle, vehicle against pedestrian or bicycle. And through that, we also were able to identify high injury intersections and what we call high injury networks, which are sections of roadway which tend to be prone to accidents or collisions. There was a substantial engagement process through this effort. There was starting with the Vision Zero Advisory Committee. There were 2 big community surveys in summer, fall of 2020, almost 1,000 responses. In October of 2021, we got almost 2,500 responses and almost 300 of them completed in Spanish. There were 3 focus groups. One was a mobility focus group, and then there were 2 other Spanish focus groups, one focused in Santa Rosa and the other in Sonoma Valley. There were also a bunch of interviews held with stakeholders, and I will show you the list in a little bit. And there was a virtual, and this was during the COVID period, a virtual countywide public workshop. And then there were also presentations at transportation-related public boards. So out of the community survey, we were able to ask people what are the most important traffic safety issues facing Sonoma County today. And you can see the top three that people identified: speeding, distracted driving, poorly maintained roads. Interestingly, what we found is sometimes perception is not always matched up with reality. Because for example, it's actually drinking, driving, and driving can be a major factor, which doesn't come out at the top there. And then we also asked, what do you think is the most important things that we can do to make things safer? And overwhelmingly, it was more enhanced safety features like protected bike lanes and streets designed to slow traffic. Another large portion wanted more enforcement and harsher penalties for speeding, DUI, and other infractions. And then a much lower number wanted more education and outreach. And then here's a list of stakeholder interviews. The list is long. I'm not going to go through it, but it is included in the Vision Zero action plan. And then at the virtual workshop on January 25th, 2022, there were over 40 attendees, and they identified the most important traffic safety issues to be distracted driving, speeding, and again, lack of protected bike lanes, and identified mitigation strategies such as narrow roadways, traffic calming, and lower speed limits. And then through this was the action plan was developed, and it identified 6 main goals, and within each of these goals, there's a series of actions. And the first one is to create safe speeds, eliminate impaired driving, create a culture of safety, build safe streets for all, make vehicles safer, and reduce private vehicle use, this is through VMT reduction, and improve data for effective decision making. And that kind of thing is and what that means, improved data, would be like when there's a collision, improving the way that the police would like maybe collect information on what was the cause of that collision, where the collision was, where, if it was impaired driving, where was that person last, to understand, what's the source of the problem. Also, it means collecting kind of hospital data about injuries. So briefly, an analysis of this. This is a regional strategy. This is already a plan. We're not here tonight to, talk about changing elements of the plan. It is a formed plan. But what we can do with it is certainly we can use it to inform future city efforts. And that is coming up, our bike and pedestrian master plan, and any kind of general plan or specific plan updates we do, as well as incorporating these action items into our capital improvement projects as we move forward. And it currently complements what we are doing, and that's, for example, we just adopted the local roadway safety plan. We have ongoing roadway, bicycle, and pedestrian improvements that we're constantly doing. Police activities such as targeting speed enforcement at problem areas, the ABC, that's training for alcohol servers, and collision reporting. And it increases our eligibility and competitiveness for regional, state, and federal grants. Examples of these are the Highway Safety Improvement Program, Safe Streets for All, which is a new plan that just came out of the 2022 bipartisan infrastructure law. And it sets aside, I think, $5 billion for these type of things. And your eligibility and competitiveness, and when you have identified plans and you can show that you're addressing areas that you've identified as important, just makes you more competitive for those dollars. Also, we have within the City of Cotati priority development areas. One is down Gravenstein Corridor, the other is Santera Way in the downtown. And by having a PDA, we're eligible for planning and technical assistance grants. I think you're going to see a large one coming your way to help us with planning of the Santera Way. And then tied to the PDAs, makes us eligible for One Bay Area grants, OBAG grants. And the PDA does require us to have some sort of measure like Vision Zero adopted. So, in conclusion, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a resolution adopting the Sonoma County Vision Zero Action Plan. And with that, I'm available for questions and open to comments.
Questions? Ben?
I'm just wondering if you can give some hypothetical scenarios where adopting this plan would commit us to do something specific. Is there some future projects where this would inform what that project looks like or things like that?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak off cuff. I want to give you a real example, but sure. For example, if we're doing a full reclamation of a road, replacing it, is there an opportunity to put in a bike trail? And for example, we're going to see something like that with Myrtle Avenue, which is going to get a full depth reclamation. And that at that time, we can use that to identify where we can do and put in improvements, something like that. When we're putting together our community plans, we can identify areas where we can target areas for enhanced pedestrian and bicycle improvements. Part of what also that the police participate in this ABC training. So the idea, part of that is to increase the number of servers that go through this ABC training. And I believe we require all of cities to participate in that kind of program.
Great.
Okay.
That's enough
Yeah.
for me. Thanks.
Sure.
Anyone this way? No? Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, our general plan and also the bike and pedestrian master plan mention our safe routes to school plans. I don't know if that responsibility lies with the school, since we have Thomas Page here with the school district, or is the city involved in that? And what's the status of that?
I'm sorry, I really don't know. I don't know if Cotati takes an active role in the Safe Routes to School program, and I don't know, Damien, if you know.
Well, I mean, the city has a longstanding project to try to improve the bicycle and pedestrian connectivity of Thomas Page to central Cotati.
That's why we did the work we did on Richardson Lane to help with that.
Richardson was a capital project as an example of that. So I mean, that's been the involvement more recently, at least, is trying to tie capital projects.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether it was mentioned in the report, but I wasn't sure in our city where that responsibility, whether it was with the school district or whether the city had involvement. But it was mentioned, like I said, in our general plan and the bike and pedestrian master plan. So I didn't know, what the status and if we were involved in that.
Yeah, I think schools are also directly involved in these funding sources for bicycle safety training and that kind of thing. Yeah. But for us, our role has primarily been exploring literally the safe route to the school. So, and that's usually where I see cities or counties involved is, if there's gaps in sidewalks or bike paths, that the cities would help pursue those.
Okay, and one other comment I was going to make too is that the report mentioned that 8% of all trips are on foot or bicycle, but it accounts for 90% of traffic deaths. So that's kind of a pretty high number. So I just want to make sure that at least, even though we don't have the bike and pedestrian plan, that we're still looking at all of our projects, with that in mind as we're kind of proceeding on making those plans. That just kind of stood out to me. So that's all. And I think that one of our guests here knew the answer to the first question I had. So I don't know if during public comment if she can provide it.
And we are working on the bike and ped plan. Is that not correct? We have kicked that off, if I'm not mistaken, right, Noah?
Yeah, sure. I can give an update on that.
Okay.
So we are working on it. Right now, we're partnering with the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, working on their countywide active transportation plan. And we participated in it, selected a consultant to help with that, and they are currently going through the procurement process and bringing them on board, signing contracts. That's being funded by a Caltrans grant. I'm expecting them to be on board by the end of this month, and we'll be engaging with them right away. We're specifically actually working on an accelerated schedule and hope to have our plan completed actually by the end of this year.
Yes, Kate?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we don't forget the folks on the other side of 116 to go to Page. There really isn't a safe, bicycle or footpath at this juncture, and just to make sure when they're looking at that to not forget our Catadians over there.
Definitely not.
Any other questions? Yes, Laura.
Thank you. My question is related to Councilmember Ford's question. As I look through these actions and the responsible parties, the key implementers that are listed, some of them say local elected officials, so I'm reading through those like, okay, that's my job. A surprising number of these fall on local police departments, new responsibilities for police departments. So I'm wondering if, has there been somebody on staff who's kind of gone through this whole thing to kind of look at, okay, what are the things we're expected to do under this? And do we have a plan for actually starting to do them? That's my question.
Yes. Yes, Steph has reviewed it and looked at the commitments, and I think our intention is to just bring them into kind of our activities as we proceed. I guess that's how I can speak to that.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, I remembered one more I wanted to ask. On the tables of the high injury network and high injury intersections, Cotati is never listed. We have a small segment of Old Redwood Highway that looks like it's mapped as part of the high injury network.
You're right.
We just didn't make the cutoff.
No, I don't know why it's not in the appendix. But you're
not that
right.
I want to be on that list.
There might be advantages to being on the list because that might help us to get some funding by addressing a problem. However, we do have a high injury network, and it is Old Redwood Highway, beginning at Commerce and ending at Myrtle or just a little bit below Myrtle, and that is both for automobiles and pedestrians. So we do have one. I don't know why it's not in that list, but we do have one.
Okay, thanks.
That might be feedback that needs to go back to the group for this.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I've talked to both, I've talked to the SCTA about that,
I thought that it was important that we're expanding the data, because I think that will help us with these lists and where there's things and to Vice Mayor's point also, I think that that will help us in the future too by capturing more data as these accidents happen, rather than, I think in the example in there it talked about, rather, well, this person did this and they're at fault, or this person, kind of looking at the area from a broader perspective of what in the environment, if you will, were there any contributing factors to that accident, not just, what happened right there. So I think that will also help in the future.
Actually, I think you bring up a great point, and though it's not in Cotati, it's very near Cotati, and a perfect example of that is Old Redwood Highway, where it meets with Railroad Avenue. That intersection needs improvement badly, and I would argue that the accidents that happen there are a function of design, and in most cases, and that's a perfect example of how we can look at, and a lot of those are broadside accidents that happen there. If you go to the data dashboard, you can click on there and look at how the accidents. But
almost every month, that poor guardrail takes a hit.
How many times do you have to replace a guardrail before?
Many, many times.
But no, that's a perfect example of how this changes the way that we look at accidents and approach them. Yeah.
And the good news on that is scheduled with the County of Sonoma to get a light there. So that is in their plans to get a light like very soon. So accordingly, that's going to happen. So yeah, no, I thought that the report was very detailed, and I really liked the way they did the actions. They were thoughtful actions, kind of things that people could think about and articulate and really consider in doing, not real technical things. So I thought that the report itself was very well put together, and even though it was very, very long, I did get a lot out of it, so I thought that was great. So are there any other questions before I open it? No? Okay. Then I will open this up for public comment. Harris, would you like to speak?
I do. Besides my public comment, I have an answer to the question about safe routes to school. I'm not sure I can do both in my 3 minutes, so may I answer?
Well, why don't you answer the question, and then you can make a comment.
And then we'll start my 3 minutes. Okay, so my organization runs the Safe Routes to School Education and Encouragement Program in individual schools. In terms of Safe Routes to School plans, in terms of the infrastructure, those are done at those are city, the jurisdictional levels. The school districts don't really do a whole lot with that because it's the cities on the streets, right? The school district can't put in a sidewalk or a crosswalk. My staff, my Safe Routes to School director is starting to create task forces between cities and their school district and school personnel and us to look at ways to all work together to improve walkability and bikeability around the schools. So there's that answer. Okay, now I get my public comment. So I have been involved with this Vision Zero project from the beginning, and encourage you to adopt it. But I think that only thinking about it as a way to get funding is a narrow way to look at it. It's a revolutionary way to look at how we make decisions about our streets and our roads, right? How people drive is partly dictated by how we have designed the streets and the roads. Using the word accident, I don't ever use the word accident. I talk about crashes, collisions, because the word accident implies it couldn't have been prevented, right? But we have designed our cities and our roads in such a way that, allow cars to drive fast and put bikes and pedestrians off to the side. So what would it look like if instead we made our decisions with safety first? That the first priority is not getting people killed on the street. How would that change how we do everything? It's a paradigm shift in my mind, not just let's check this off so we can get another grant. And it will require, just like other jurisdictions have made, climate emergency resolutions and, homeless emergency resolutions and vision. It's easy to make a resolution. But if you were actually to embrace it, it means privileging or prioritizing safety over everything else, over neighbors complaining about losing some parking places because you're narrowing a roadway for safety. It means, slowing things down even though people don't like it. So it's a paradigm shift. It's a different way of looking at things, and I encourage you to take that step. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else wishing to comment? No? Would you check with our Zoom attendees, please?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to the Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, thank you for that. And I believe we also did get a couple of notices online in support of this action plan. So we did also get that, and those will be attached to the online version web packet.
Correct. There were 2 comments received after the agenda was published regarding this item, and those are on the web agenda under information received after the agenda was posted. Okay. And in print here in the chamber.
Thank you so much. And so with that, any more discussion, or I would be looking for a motion?
Sure. I make a motion to adopt a resolution adopting the Sonoma County Vision Zero Action Plan.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, and good job. I think it was a good job by all. The report was very good. All righty. So next up, we have adoption of the revised City of Cotati investment policy and contract approval to implement active investment management. Somehow I think that this might be Angela.
It might be. I'm sure Damien will jump in. And then we also have other participants that should be online. But I'll go ahead and give a start. So good evening, Mayor, council members, and our public tonight. I'm presenting to you our policy update for investments, as well as a proposal for moving to an active management portfolio using Optum Investment Partners. We have Bob or Dave available for questions or comments on the presentation on this item as well. Let's see if we can get them online. Okay. See if I can get my slides going. So this slide was added post-packet publication, just like the comments, but we wanted to provide council really a miniature economic update in light of all the things that we're seeing in the national environment right now. There's a lot happening, and there's a lot of things that are continuing to happen. And with the budget coming and all these things, we just wanted to take this moment to pause, discuss these things, and talk about, maybe what the impacts are happening. So we have an inverted yield curve still. So the Treasury yield curve continues to have a higher return rate on the short-term investments compared to the long-term investments. So there's that insecurity happening about what's going to happen in our future, and so people are keeping their investments in the short term. There's also been some significant bank failures. There was 3 major bank failures in this this calendar year, and the latest was just in May 1st. These banks were all identified as those who had some investments that are higher risk assets. And so we're really not seeing this as indicative of something major happening in the market, but it is something we're being aware of. This is things that are happening, and we want to be thoughtful about how these impact. We also have the Fed is continuing to raise our interest rates. They had a recent increase from 5% to 5.25%, and just in May 3rd, but they are indicating in their public notices that they are thinking they are going to pause those hikes. These interest rate hikes are becoming smaller and smaller. They started, 2%, 1%. Now they're down to just 0.25%. And so what is that indicating? Inflation coming back down. Everything's getting more aligned, so they don't need to pull back on the economy as much as they were doing over the last year. And again, now we're in another political imposed economic state of mind where we have the federal debt ceiling what's going to happen with that. Are they going to approve the debt ceiling increase? We don't have an imminent date where we would go into default, but what's the impact of that? Could it possibly happen? No, it's not really going to happen, but what are the impacts of these things? How is it going to affect the state and interest rates and things going forward? And I do want to share, because I was in discussion with OIP over this, and I had a great quote from Dave. So he said, we cannot control any aspect of the inverted yield curve. The best advice we can give is don't assume this current yield curve is normal. So just talking about the economy in general, we can't anticipate that any of this is really normal. Don't assume that this will continue for the long term. We recommend investing for the long term, and even at today's rates, with a 5-year treasury at 3.5%, it's a solid return for our local agencies. The short-term rates can change quickly. Things are changing, just in our environment and our economy quickly, but we can't really just do a good job of by speculating. We have to have a long-term plan and a strategy to move forward. So really, that's our impact. That's what we want as our policy. We need to think about these things in the long term and how we're still going to be able to approve and provide for our community going forward. So what are we required to do? So I wanted to revisit the page from our last discussion about our investment policy and revise and how we're applying all those criteria that we discussed about as our requirements as active agent participants with our prudence standard, and as well as meeting the state requirements. And so we have these requirements for monthly or quarterly reporting that should be done. We're going to have our policy update on an annual basis. We want to remain compliant with the prudent investor standard, which is proving the safeguarding of a principal and liquidity, and the compliance with the state code around safety of our principal, liquidity, and our yield. So these are all fundamental pieces. They were already included within our investment policy, but they only become more emphasized with our proposed revisions to the policy around specifically the prudent investor standard and making sure that we're being transparent, reporting everything out, and meeting the requirements that we need and for our surplus funds. So going more into detail about the specific changes in our policy. So we really kind of think of this as the existing policy plus. So we did have a change to the existing policy around our social considerations, and city staff have really honed into the considerations and found that the revisions provided us an ability to remain compliant with the state code while still feasibly implementing and being able to report on social considerations for our investments. Next is the required review and the investment portfolio for material adverse impacts. So this would be something that goes beyond what is already required for our annual financial audit. So during our audit, we evaluate all of our investments, but this would bring that forward as a part of our quarterly report to council, and that would be required per the policy. For other new components, make sure I'm on the right slide. We really want to formalize the controls. So all of the next sections are about formalizing what we're going to do to make sure we are being prudent and laying them out so it's not just something that is good practices, something we're talking about and we're doing, but let's take credit for it and put it in our policy so that way we have it set forward, as to what we're going to be beholden to. So we want to include that the investment that we're going to take before investing in pools and the money market funds, that we're going to review those and make sure that they are investigated for prudency at that level in the investment pools and the money market funds. We're going to make sure that those funds are also collateralized as a part of our requirements and have percentage requirements for the collateralization. We're also going to be requiring that we have safe keeping and custody of our assets and investments through a third-party custodian. So we won't be holding these assets in our local accounts or anything else. They will be held. Currently, we're proposing to use U.S. Bank as our third-party custodian because we already have a relationship with them, and so we can get a better rate with them. They hold our bonds. We also want to verify that we have a diversification of risk. Again, this is something that we do, but we didn't have clearly documented within our policy previously, so that no more than 5% will be from a single issuer. This does not include pools or federal treasuries. Next, we stepped into controls kind of continued and enhanced, where we specify that the maximum securities will be no more than 5 years. This is already set forward in the state requirements that they should not be longer than 5 years. And so that will bring us into consistency with state law and being specific. It was already in our current policy, but it was within the tables for each investment, what the maturity terms are. And so this just spent it all out in one section that none of them shall exceed 5 years. While this we added clarification on internal control risks and responsibility to be held by the administrative services, and that we will be compliant to our policy in developing additional procedures that are required per the policy. So we will be developing any of the procedures that go along making purchases and reporting as well. It sets this performance standard for benchmark objectives, and this would be setting a goal for where we want our returns to be and making sure that we're hitting those and reporting out if we aren't meeting those. So this is really a kind of a turn on our investments, where it was like, what's great if we get some good investment returns, but we're not going to try and strive for excellence or something above and beyond. This actually helps us direct to what we want to be able to perform to and hold ourselves accountable to try and reach those benchmarks and report out against those benchmarks. It also mandates the quarterly reporting as well as an annual review of the investment policy. So again, this is a lot of additions to our policy. These things were already kind of happening, but really aren't possible unless we have a partner to help us go through these processes and procedures and better strategic objectives at actively managing this, but also actively managing our managing of it, so that we can both work on a policy, on our processes, make sure they're consistent with our cash flow requirements, with our capital projects. And that really comes from our desire to have this active management of our surplus funds and partnering with OIP to provide that service to better utilize these surplus funds. So at our last meeting, council requested a cost analysis comparing active versus kind of passive management. And it was kind of more of like a, what would it be if we had pooled funds and moved to something different? And so we did provide a brief calculation, and it's included at packet page 178. And the sample shows that really there is a return on investment that's increased by using active management, specifically using OPI, even with the fees that are imposed. So with this, we are really eager to get our surplus funds working more for the city by engaging in this partnership. So this is just a reminder slide that really it is a challenge for small cities like ours. This is not something that's really available due to the capacity of staff, the knowledge of staff, or even the accessibility of staff to get the information to make these investments. So if we have the knowledge, we might not have the access to a team that can provide us, information on the assets that are available for sale on a timely basis. And so this opportunity really is new, and that's why OIP is we think is a great partner, because this is where they are strategically focusing themselves in a niche that's not being overly served, because other investment banks and brokers don't want to work with cities or any even individuals that have smaller assets less than the 25 million. So if council chooses to approve staff's recommendation, we would move forward with engaging our investment advisory services with OIP and engaging with the custodial bank, which again, we're looking at US Bank, and TVI Investments. We've provided background information on TVI. They are someone that we've been, I've been having discussions with quite a long time around the broker-dealer. He's provided, he's been wanting our business for a while. I've been providing just what's happening in our environment, our economics, what's happening in the marketplace. And so we've built a great partnership already with them, and just conversations without even us paying them anything. And so we would really advise using them to go forward. And then we would have those, bring them on. We would then start right away actively moving some funds, setting up our trust account with U.S. Bank in order to start evaluating and getting some returns on our surplus funds. And so that is the end of the presentation, and we're happy to address any questions, concerns, and move forward. Questions? Yes, Laura?
Thank you. I have a few questions. First of all, I'm just trying to understand the role of the third-party custodian, and if they're, given these surprising number of bank failures recently, if our third-party custodian were to suddenly fail, what would the impact be on us?
So per our investment policy, all of our individual investments would be under the FDIC limits, and so they would be covered. So that's the immediate coverage, right? So that's where we have our policy where those pieces would be covered. If U.S. Bank goes under, that would be a significant item that would have other implications around the nation. So that would, our bonds would have some issues because all of them are being held by U.S. Bank as well. So I wouldn't know. I wouldn't want to speculate beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question I have is regarding the internal controls. I was happy to see all these updates to it. When you were developing the changes and additions to the internal controls, were there some industry best practices that you were referring to, or I'm just sort of curious how you developed all the individual elements that you wanted to put in place?
Absolutely. So again, we're a small city. So I took our policy and I said, hey, Dave, you know what the best practices are. You've been in the industry. You've been doing this. And they said, hey, give us your investment policy. We will help update it to what the best practices are. And they did this before they even came and talked to you guys in person. They did a first glance, and then Damien and I went through it with them. And so it's really relying on their expertise to make sure we're bringing it up to the best standards possible.
Okay, thank you. And last question, could you just explain, for my benefit, the collateralization piece? And I didn't quite understand what that meant or how it works for the 110% and the 102% for the different investments.
So David, I think that would probably be more technical, if you wouldn't mind assisting with the collateralization component.
Yeah, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, so different types of investments have different collateralization requirements. The most common term that you see that is listed with bank deposits themselves. So deposits in a checking account require collateralization. And that's one of the issues that happened recently with some of those bank failures is they had sufficient collateral, but the problem is they had longer term investments or investments that had longer maturities than the demands for liquidity in that space. What we're talking about in this policy is really referencing some of those pooled accounts and CDs where those banks that are ultimately issuing or those corporations that are issuing CDs out there in the marketplace, they're required to have that additional collateral, meaning that they have to have access to liquid funds that exceed the amount of the investments that they're issuing. So if we're investing in a Bank of America CD for $250,000, they're required to maintain that additional liquid collateral access to liquid funds. It doesn't have to be maintained in cash. It just has to be liquid by nature and accessible to them. And so LAIF has a liquidity requirement and a collateralization requirement. So do county pools, and so do the JPA pools as well. So you'll see those across the spectrum in terms of banks and pools that have liquid needs, access to the funds quickly, have to have some of those additional liquidity requirements, as opposed to federal treasuries and federal agencies. Those are longer term investments. There's no actual collateralization requirement on those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I re-ask one of Vice Mayor Sparks' questions, because I didn't understand the answer? What does the custodial bank do?
So they just hold the investments. So they are really just holding the investments. So they hold the CDs, they hold the federal treasuries that we hold.
So the CDs are not, let's say we use U.S. Bank, are not U.S. Bank CDs necessarily?
Correct.
And so what does it mean to hold them? It's a piece of paper in a file? It means they manage the computer account that...
Exactly.
What does that mean?
Yes, so they hold the funds, and then they give us reports on them, just like you would have. We currently have an account with RBC. So RBC doesn't have those, they aren't the funds that we're purchasing. They just purchase them and hold them for us and report out on them. So we're not holding those funds.
So they're kind of like my, if I was an active stock trader, they're like my stockbroker or something like that, who kind of manages my purchases, but...
Right, so the broker-dealers don't hold the purchase. They just buy them and sell them, and then we hold them in another account, and that account would be the third party.
I'm wondering if...
I think David wants to
yeah,
say something. He's got his hand up.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to bring it down to a level that everybody in the audience might be able to understand. It's very similar to a brokerage account, as you just described, where if I have a TD Ameritrade account or something like that, they are the holder of the cash until the purchase gets made. They're the bank that's actually transacting that transaction. When the broker dealer sends those instructions, they're sending the money out to that entity to make that investment. They're reporting out on the investments themselves and the fair market value on those investments, which Angela is required to have in her financial statements. And then when the money comes back in on a matured investment, they immediately put it into a money market fund that the city decides upon, so that even money in between investments is making interest on the money. So they're coordinating all that. They have reporting requirements, and they're holding cash in very short stints when we're in between investments.
Great, thanks. Can I ask one more? Yeah. So in the new reporting section in the policy, it says the City Administrative Services Director may review and render quarterly reports to the City Council. Is that at your option? Why does it say may instead of will?
It's consistent with state law. So we just put may. That way, if we miss one quarter, we're still compliant with state law. It would just be a policy thing. Our goal is to continue to do the quarterly reports and provide them, but we're not required by state law. State law just says may. So I wanted them to be consistent. If that's something that is a desired change, then that can be changed. But then we want to make sure we're acting on a policy that's going to continue to work in perpetuity.
But the intent is to provide quarterly reports?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, then I will open this up for public comment, and we have lost our audience here. So Kevin, would you please go to our Zoom audience?
Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Thank you. I will bring it back. Is there any other discussion? If not, I would be looking for a motion.
I move that we adopt a resolution approving the update of the investment management policy within the City of Cotati's financial principles and policies, and authorize the city manager to take actions necessary to begin actively managing the city's surplus funds in compliance with the investment policy, including engaging with Optum Investment Partners.
Second.
That was a mouthful.
I know. All in one breath. I was impressed.
That was very good. Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes unanimously. Yes, and then we are going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, I would like to call our meeting back to order after our recess, and we will be moving on to our next item, which is the dash cam agreement for police electric vehicles. And
Yes, I'll start this one out.
You'll
and then
start
the
that
chief-
one,
yeah.
okay?
Yeah. So if you think you're having deja vu, you're not. We actually have talked about this before, but we're just coming back because last time we had the conversation, staff didn't really have a lot of the information to answer some of the questions the council had. So we paused on ordering that equipment and have gone back and hopefully figured out the answers to all the questions that were asked before. I will also say that in addition to it just being myself last time, who was only half informed in the conversation, the chief is also here tonight. We do have two people from Axon, who is the vendor, on Zoom, who can also help answer questions if there's any questions that the chief or I can't answer. All right, so ALPRs, it's an acronym for Automated License Plate Recognition Systems. And what they do is they capture a vehicle's license plate and transform that license plate image into alphanumeric characters and compare it to a hot list, which is put out by Department of Justice through the NCIC. And this basically is a list. The hot list is basically a list of vehicles that are wanted in association with some crime. So there might be, I mean, it can be any variety of things. It might be a missing person, it might be a murder, it might be just a stolen vehicle. There's a lot of reasons why a vehicle license plate would be sought by law enforcement. So that's how it ends up. These get sent basically to the central repository, and then they get sent out to law enforcement agencies to basically keep a lookout for this vehicle because it's wanted. And ALPR databases, there is, I will point out on packet page 200, that's just a screenshot for all the information that exists inside an ALPR system. So it's an image of sort of basically the picture, it's a still image, a picture of the license plate, the OCR interpretation of that license plate so that you see the original image, plus you can also see what the computer thought it saw. So if there's any inaccuracy in that reading, that you can verify that. And then it also has the date, time, and the spatial location of the image where that was taken. So that's just at its core, that's what ALPR systems do. They basically take an image of a license plate, they tell you where and when it was there, and then if there's something on this hot list that DOJ puts out, it just literally compares it to a hot list. If there is a ping, in other words, if the plate matches up to something in the hot list, then it basically flags the officer, and then the officer is then responsible for confirming the flag, right? So you don't act just on the flag; you have to confirm the information that triggered the flag. And I will say also this: the owner in that image, that's the owner is the officer, not the owner of the vehicle that the plate's on, right? So the ALPR systems, they don't read plates in the sense that they don't run plates. So there's no connection between the LPR system and, say, like a DMV database that might have the registration information of the owners. That's the responsibility of the police officer, sort of in follow-up, to confirm that this plate actually is still wanted and making sure it's the right plate, and all the due diligence they have to do before they take any action. So specifically, the item tonight is about the Axon dash cam, and just to take a step back from the ALPR, one of the primary purposes of the system that's being proposed is to take video imaging, take video capture of what happens before a stop. So right now, all of our officers do have body cameras. So when they exit the vehicle, it does capture everything that happens when they exit the vehicle. But oftentimes in traffic stops in particular, things will happen prior to actually exiting the vehicle. That's important and potentially relevant to what happens when the officer exits the vehicle. So The ALPR, or I'm sorry, the dash cam device that's one of its primary functions, is just to capture everything that occurs outside the vehicle prior to the officer leaving the vehicle. And then this conversation came up because while we have the video camera to record the stop, this is sort of a software-enabled feature that could be turned on, the ALPR feature. So anyway, that led to the conversation before, just to remind everyone that that this was sort of an ancillary feature to what the main purpose of the video cameras were for. All right, so the Axon system specifically, this is in the staff report, but I'll just reiterate the high points. So how these work is the dash cam, it does integrate into the other Axon products that the officer uses, the body cam and some of the other devices, so that they trigger, automatically when certain things happen. So it's not a voluntary thing, it's an involuntary sort of trigger so that it all happens seamlessly regardless of the stressfulness of the situation. When the officer returns back to the yard, it all gets uploaded to evidence.com, which is just a secure website that Axon runs. That's where our body cam video goes. That's where the dash cam video would go. That's where, if the council moves forward on the ALPR feature, that's where the ALPR information goes. The ALPR and all the information in this evidence.com website is fully compliant with the cybersecurity standards set by the FBI. It's called the CGIS standards, Criminal Justice Information System standards. They publish best practices and standards to be compliant to hold criminal justice type information. Evidence.com is a cloud solution, and it's we've been using it more and more for, as I mentioned, the information that we collect, but also other case information that's associated with it, because that's how we, with the large files associated with all this video files that we have, we can package it up and send it to like the district attorney for cases and things like that. The hot lists, as I mentioned earlier, that's Department of Justice that pushes that out. The Axon systems, they update those hot lists every 6 hours. So every 6 hours is a new version of the list that gets published and then goes out to all the vehicles that have ALPRs. Vehicle retention, ALPR retention. So there is also a screenshot on packet page 202, just the screenshot from the Axon system. And this just gives you an idea of, it's user definable. Our policy, our city policy, which is based on government code related to video retention, is 1 year. And so that's what it's set at currently. There are definitely variations in retentions that you see, but with regard to at least the state law standard that is in our current policy, it's 1 year. The way the Axon system works with the plate reads is that when they're uploaded to evidence.com, they're only available, the Axon system only has the plate reads available to Cotati PD. So no other police department can directly access it. How they would access it is if they are investigating a case, they would have to, like any other law enforcement request, would have to be through a channel where, and they'd have to have, obviously, legitimate law enforcement need for it. They would have to ask the Cotati PD for the record, and then one of our authorized users would have to do the search for the record and then provide them with the information. So it's not available even to other law enforcement agencies in the Axon system. The Axon system does have a public website that's on page 203. It's just screenshots to give you an idea. So it's a transparency thing that Axon does that would be available to us if we went forward with this. And the system does log user activity by agency, name, date, time, and purpose of the search. So that's always available if system audits were performed to confirm that all the searches are legitimate. And I think that is all the high points. Just the last thing I'll add is under financial considerations, the agreement attached is a 5-year agreement, and with all the features, it would be $63,000 basically over 5 years. If that's with ALPR. If ALPR is not included, it's $55,000 over that same 5 years. But it's at a much lower cost if it's included at the initial purchase. If we tried to add it later, it'd be almost twice as much. So, you know, rather than basically $7,000, it'd be $15,000 if it was ordered separately. So that's why we paused on the order and just decided that it'd be better to have just a more informed discussion before we move forward on it. And with that, I'd be happy to give it to the chief to add some additional information.
Yeah, thank you, Council. Well, Damien covered a lot there. I just wanted to add that I would like to see this option. So what we're missing is, if you picture the officer driving down the road, what we're missing is the video capture of probable cause to stop a suspected DUI offender. It would be nice to capture that. Officers see a lot of crazy things driving around. They see domestic violence in a moving car, people talking on cell phones, etc. Again, it would be nice to capture what the officer is seeing, capturing that probable cause for the stop. And like the city manager said, it's associated then with their body-worn camera. Any photographs they take can also put in evidence.com. So when I talk about like a domestic violence case, like a rolling domestic violence arrest, we would have the video from the officer's point of view of driving to stop the car, then the interaction on body-worn camera now that they're out of the car, any photographs taken, all of that media, whether it's the photographs taken by an iPhone, the body-worn camera, or the in-car camera, that would all be associated in one case together in evidence.com and be available for discovery for both prosecution and defense attorneys. And so I think it's a good enhancement for us, and I think it helps with transparency as well.
All right, so we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Ron?
I had a question about the police policy regarding data retention. Maybe you could help me find where it says the 1 year in our policy. I'm looking at the ALPR section, and it just says in accordance with our, or something like that, with our established data retention guidelines. So I'm wondering if you could just direct me where the actual time is located.
It'll take me a minute, but I will hunt
okay.
for that right
I'll
now.
let you work on that.
Okay.
And then I also had some questions for the vendors, if they might respond. I was reading through the frequently asked questions list that was included as a link in the agenda packet, and I had some questions about data sharing. In two of the answers, it talks about how the capability to share data with other agencies and the capability to share data with third-party contractors such as Vigilant is not currently implemented, but could be added as a future feature. So I'm wondering if that were to be, if those data sharing capabilities were to be added, would that have to be turned on by us proactively, or is that something that would just start happening if you were to add those features?
So,
Hi.
here we go. Yeah.
Mayor Harvey and members of council, thanks for having us today. My name is Daniel Burt, and I'm the Axon representative for Cotati PD. I also have Assad Khan on the call as well, and he is the systems engineer with Axon. So to answer those specific questions, I would say we don't currently have a partnership with Vigilant, nor do we have a current partnership with interagency sharing. So I would say it's tough to say what that would look like if and when we do get to that. it's not really in place right now. So I guess I can't really give an answer to what would happen if we were to make that available.
So I guess my question is, maybe I can reframe it so you understand. I have concerns about data privacy, and one of the features I like about your system is that the data is not automatically shared with Vigilant or with other agencies. So I would like to have some assurance that that's going to remain the case in the future unless we do something proactive to change that.
Well, we would never start just sharing data without permission from agencies. So sharing data is entirely up to the agency because the agency owns that data. So Axon isn't just going to automatically start sharing ALPR data, body camera footage, or in-car camera footage with agencies or other companies without the consent of the agency, obviously.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question for you, which is in your frequently asked questions, it says that you ask customers to sign a data sharing agreement to be used for machine learning and anonymized data that you would use for your own purposes. Is that a mandatory part of the contract in order to do the agreement, or is it okay for us to just say, no, no thank you, we wouldn't like to participate in that?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm not sure.
Just to talk more to the feature, sorry, this is Astad Khan with Axon as well too. Just to talk more to that feature, what it actually does is our system is 93% accurate when it reads a plate in front of you, right? But the officer does have a way to kind of train the system to get better in case it doesn't pick up this license plate correctly, right? So when you do get a license plate read or a hit through our system, you do have the ability to tell the system if it's correct or incorrect. And really all you're doing is trying to train the system to get better. That data is not shared, really is all kind of making that AI learning a little bit better for you.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense to me.
Is a good example of that the one that you have in the picture? Because I view that as an HHOPIE, and it interpreted it as HHDPIE. Is that a good example of what you're talking about?
Exactly, that would be it, right? So that way, at least you can create an audit within the system to say, you know, the license plate that was flagged is actually not the right license plate. So that way, it doesn't incorrectly read it again in future tense.
Thank you. Chief, did you have something to add?
Just for the Vice Mayor, it's in the lexical policy, it's 470.5. It's on page 417, and it describes the 1-year data retention policy.
$470.5, you said?
0.5.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Sylvia?
Yes, I had a question about the ALPR hot list that's created. It says here that is generated by police officers, so I imagine it's different police officers in different jurisdictions create a hot list. Entering vehicle plates associated with crimes. And so that's a question that I had. Associated crimes, is that just, are those stops, arrests, misdemeanors, felonies? What's considered associated with crimes? Or is it convictions, or, you know, what level is considered that?
So all of the license plates that are red will go into a database, and they may be associated with a crime that we don't even know occurred yet. And so these ALPRs, they're investigative tools as well. So for example, if our city had a unique crime and we couldn't solve that unique crime, and say a different jurisdiction has a similar unique crime and they do have a suspect or somebody they arrested, and so that person has a car, and then once that information is shared, we could check our database of our license plate reads to see if that car was in our city and involved in that unique crime. Another example would be, unfortunately, there's an increase in anti-Semitic crime. And as you're aware, we have a synagogue in our town They ask for extra patrol often, especially during certain holidays for the Jewish community. And we travel there a lot around the synagogue in that vicinity. Another jurisdiction could have a anti-Semitic crime against the synagogue, have a suspect, and then we could look to see if they were in our vicinity. Or if there was vandalism at the synagogue and we didn't have a suspect, maybe there's another person caught in a different jurisdiction with a similar crime, and now we're checking for license plate reads. So it's beyond the DOJ hits. It's an investigative tool as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate, especially in those situations that you mentioned, but I was just wondering about the list is created by police officers, and how are those plates or those vehicle plates submitted? What kind of crimes?
How do they migrate into the system?
Right, what type of crimes would trigger being on the hot list?
So they get there through the Department of Justice. So all police departments have CLETS entries, so it's California Law Enforcement Transmission System. So like, for example, a stolen car would be loaded up by a Cotati police dispatcher if it was stolen in our jurisdiction, and that would migrate to DOJ, and that would make it to the hot list. You can request that DOJ also put other unique crimes as a hot list. Amber alerts, for example, as well. So you see the Amber alerts on TV. Those will migrate in the system as well. So not just stolen cars, but even Amber alerts or significant crimes, they can migrate to the hot list. And when an officer passes that car, it will show up on their MDC.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was like a threshold of crime. I mean, crime is crime, but what if it was something minor that a police officer said, "Oh, well, I'm going to submit him to a hot list." What is there a threshold for that?
Not really. So even beyond, so there's a lot of capabilities, and maybe our Axon people can help me with this. But if we had our own car that we wanted to look for, so say we had a stalking victim, and this is ongoing, and we knew what the stalker drove, and he keeps committing this stalking crime, we could enter that ourselves and flag that, and that wouldn't even be associated with the DOJ hot list, for example.
Chief, I can add something to that as well. Yeah. Some examples of crimes that you could, so within evidence.com, which is where everything is hosted, you can choose the categories that you want to alert officers on for specific crimes. So crimes such as carjackings, batteries, assaults, felony theft, fugitives, missing persons, Amber Alerts, Chief mentioned, violation of order of protection, things like that. You can set those specific alerts. And if there's things like that you may not find value, or maybe they're lower level crimes such as stolen license plate, something like that, you can take that off the checklist for things that you want to get hits within the ALPR system.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has follow-ups on that, but thank you very much.
Ben, did you?
No, the chief answered mine. And
Okay. Okay.
I read somewhere in all of this that it's the police are the only ones who have visibility into the system, and I just wanted to check if we were to set up a citizen oversight committee, as we have talked about, would they be able to have access to the data, or is it only limited to hired police?
I would think it would be DOJ sensitive.
Yeah, citizens wouldn't have access to that. I mean, you could aggregated data like what's shown on the public portal, that kind of thing, maybe, but not the actual individual data.
Right. Well, I'm thinking, to Sylvia's point about the threshold and what type of crimes are being, it's being used to track. And, again, it's not necessarily a negative thing, could be positive information that we want to highlight.
Yeah.
That I just want to make sure that, if and when we do get this together, that this could be very good information for them to have access to also. Not necessarily the actual numbers, but like the types of crimes that are impacted by this system.
I think it's Well, I think maybe part of the answer to that question is, this particular system does have on the public-facing webpage, it tells you the hot list categories. So at least the categories of things that are on the hot lists.
Right, but I mean specific to Cotati, right?
You mean if our agency added specific stuff to it?
No, it sounded like our representative from Axon said that we could, for example, like stolen plates, if we didn't want to flag stolen plates, we wouldn't have to do that. Is that what you're?
Oh yeah, you can turn categories on and off.
Is that what the question is?
I guess, no, I think what I'm trying, maybe I'm not saying it well.
Okay.
I guess I'm looking for a bit of a data analysis on the efficacy of the system and how it positively impacts Cotati and crime in Cotati, right? And so I'm just looking at how we would evaluate that moving forward, because there's definitely some privacy concerns, but I also hear the potential benefits. So I'm just looking at a way of measuring that benefit.
So can I say that another way, Chief? So maybe because most of what it's used for is investigative purposes and helping solve crimes and that, so maybe as part of the report that you do to us, where it's been helpful for certain things, you can highlight, this is where this has been useful to us in solving X, Y, and Z.
So included in the annual report?
Yes, a part of the audit. So whether it's, I mean, again, I'm still an advocate for the Citizen Oversight Committee, but before we have that, yes, as being part of the report. I mean, basically just, we have these privacy concerns, and I hear what you're saying about the potential benefits. I'd just like to see what they are. I'd like to see them, the actual, events in which having this helped solve that crime or get that stalker off the street, or what, all of these great, or get this poor kid returned to their parents, or whatever. That it would be helpful to hear how it's working rather than just what our concerns are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one more thing I'll just add as just on a slightly different note, but to clarify, because I know we've been talking about what's on the hot list in terms of crimes, but they're not. So what's kind of what makes it a little bit difficult to define it is that it's not necessarily crimes, right? It could be like missing people and things like that. That's not a crime, but you're looking for a license plate because you think it's associated with a missing person. That may or may not be a crime. And the best list I've seen is on packet page 200 and 201, probably those numbered items 1 through 5 have at least sort of general categories of why something would be on the hot list, which could be a crime, or it could be a missing vehicle, or it could be a missing person. So there's a wide variety of reasons why it might be there.
Yeah, I actually circled one of those, number 3, locate witnesses and victims of violent crime. I don't know if that's, I don't know. It feels like if a victim doesn't want to kind of come forward or something, I don't know, just feels like it's a breach of their wanting to be anonymous or something. I don't know. And I know in some cases it's needed. It just kind of felt a little kind of Big Brother-ish in a way.
Well, I mean, Chief probably can talk better.
Well, that wouldn't be a hot list thing. That would probably be, sounds like unique to an agency looking for that. Yeah. And I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
But I think it's up to people whether they want to participate or not,
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not talking about the hot list either. I'm just talking about what the benefits of having it are for Cotati specifically, right? Like when we were talking about the beanbag rifles, right? It's like, well, when was this used? Under what circumstances? How did it benefit Cotati? I have the same questions about this, right? Like I recognize there could be benefits, but I'd like to, learn how was this used? How did it help? Why this was a good thing for Cotati.
So again, I think a first step would be for you to, as you utilize this, because I believe you will, to provide back to the council examples of where this has been beneficial so that people can get the gist of it, because you're in the deep weeds of it, but people want to understand how it's useful, because I have no doubt that it isn't useful. It's just another tool in the tool case. But I think people need to understand how it was useful to you in solving X, Y, or Z.
So council's looking for transparency.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's
That's what
totally
I'm hearing.
doable.
This is Assad Khan here. I just want to elaborate on the hot list, how it is actually shared with the vehicles, at least when it comes to the vendor, the Axon system. That hot list is actually not searchable, right? So it's going to be an extract from the NCI database and sent all in an encrypted fashion to the vehicles. Any car that passes by that license plate reader, if it does get flagged, it notifies that officer at that point that so-and-so vehicle has been flagged. So coming back to that question about sharing that information, really it's not even a searchable hot list at that point. Only what comes across as a hit is what's going to get notified to you. You do have the ability, I think Chief was getting to this before, is you do have the ability to create your own local hot list. As suppose the agency had a BOLO or something that was not published to the national NCIC as of yet. You do have the ability to create your own hot list records for instant, basically, searchability. And beyond that, I mean, we do have the ability to integrate with state hot lists, really. So, but again, what I want to make on this point is that hot list is not really a searchable tool.
Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Then I will open this up for public comment, and there was no one left in the audience here, so Kevin, would you do the honors?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay. So any further discussion? Yes.
Thank you. I was pleased to learn that we can have local control over our data retention. I would feel comfortable approving the ALPR system purchase if we ratcheted down the data retention. So at the 1 year level, I think that's totally unnecessary and too much of a privacy invasion in terms of storing so much Dragnet personal data. So I was looking at our police policy just now, and the 1 year that's referenced in government code, if you look at the code, it's talking about video recordings, not photographs. And so I don't think, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to me that we are legally required to hold on to ALPR data for a year, especially since in the staff report it says jurisdictions range typically from 60 days to 2 years on their ALPR data. So I would feel comfortable purchasing the ALPR system if we could reduce that data retention. My personal preference would be very short, something like 7 days or 14 days, but I'd be open to hearing from my colleagues about what they think about that. And I'd like to see us make a police policy adjustment about our ALPR retention for at least the Axon system, since I know we might not have control right now over the data retention for the Vigilant system that's through the consortium, but for what we have control over, to reduce the data retention period. And I'd also like to know what our procedure for auditing. It said that the searches would be auditable, which was nice. It's like anytime that someone from our agency searches, that's recorded, and it would be nice if that information about that could be included in the police report. Just, you know, what kinds of things are we searching for, and how are we making use of it? But my main concern is the data retention. So I'd like to hear what my colleagues think about that. Did you? Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure you asked a question, but you did acknowledge me, and I raised my hand. So I was going to make a comment, which is that we look very, very hard to try to identify authority for retaining the documents for less than 1 year. The standard is that any city record, and records kind of narrowly defined in this context, needs to be retained for 2 years. And there are certain exceptions, including the one that's referenced here. The way these systems work, they do use a video camera, and those are captures from video. So we think it's justifiable to use the 1-year standard, but we haven't found any good authority for going below 1 year in terms of retention. So that's why your staff report and your policy has long suggested the 1 year retention schedule. I'm here to readily acknowledge that many jurisdictions have shorter retention periods. I just don't know what authority they're relying upon, and we spent a regrettable amount of time trying to find, because I knew where you guys were on this, and we just can't find the authority.
I'll also just add to that, the only police agency that I know about that has some sort of statutory authority, at least clearly defined, is the CHP, but they have a special carve-out for some reason. There's some special legislation that
Yeah, it actually prevents them from obtaining the information for longer than, is it 30 days or 60 days? 60 days. I mean, the legislature really needs to fix this problem because we have this general records retention policy. And so if law enforcement wants to have the information retained for a period of time for investigatory purposes, that turns it into a record under these records retention statutes, and then you have to retain it for 2 years or 1 year or whatever it is. I think everyone, including the legislature, would readily acknowledge that this information, I don't know, that is a dragnet. You have a lot of information out there. It's very sensitive. There's no reason, if police doesn't need it, it shouldn't be retained, right? It should be destroyed. But it's more of a state law problem than something we can try to resolve.
Can I ask a follow-up based on that? So a follow-up question, if we don't retain it at all, if we set the retention to 0, then have we not created a record and we do not have to retain it at that point?
Well, I know some of the systems have kind of a different setup where all the documents are retained by the company, and the jurisdiction only retains the records that it asks for. So that's a possibility. I don't think there's any way, because I think law enforcement needs, may need access to records that they became aware of the need for 14 days after. So there's really no way to know that 0 would work for law enforcement. So once you make that decision at the law enforcement level, it becomes a record, and you're stuck with the state law requirement.
Well, I can answer the question on no retention. That will not work. So we've experienced in Cotati, unfortunately, people trying to report things that didn't happen. So, for example, there was somebody that I think he had too much to drink downtown and tried to report his vehicle stolen. And our officers said, this just doesn't feel right, and checked the system, and his car was parked nearby. We've also had the same experience with people with dementia. So we have to have some kind of retention. And I go back, as far as retention goes, I like the year. I described unique crimes, right? Sometimes 6 months go by, 9 months go by. That's when the other jurisdiction says, we have a unique crime. Could happen in your city. We're checking that. Or when I talk about the synagogue, there needs to be, I think there's a need for the 1 year retention to solve crime. But there definitely needs to, there can't be 0 retention. I just don't see that happening.
Well, my question was more of a legal question. I was just trying to understand, legally, would that mean that we weren't creating a record?
I think it would, but I just don't think it would work practically for the reasons the chief mentioned. I mean, that's, I said earlier that the definition of record in this context is narrow, and that's one of the things. If you're not retaining it for future reference, then it's not a record for this purpose. So your point is well taken, right? If it was 0, then it wouldn't be a record.
And the legal requirements are not just records associated with an investigation, they're all records.
Correct. Correct. They're all city records. That's just the general records retention rule is 2 years. And then there's certain exceptions for certain categories you can retain for less than 2 years.
Yes.
So now I'm a little confused. So if we're saying it is a record, if we keep it for a year, then why is it we don't have to keep it for 2 then?
We think it's reasonable to rely on the video recording 1-year policy that's allowed under state law. I not remember, I think it's 34,090.6. It says 1 year for routine video recordings. While technically what's captured is a screenshot, it was produced from a video recording, so we believe that's a reasonable approach to conclude that the information is a video recording, and so 1 year would be appropriate if you make that interpretation.
So it's a video recording, not a record?
Well, a video recording could be a record under the way the state law defines it. Records are all forms: audio, video, documentary evidence. Those are all considered records under state law.
So the distinction then is we keep the video for 1 year unless it's used in an investigation or becomes evidence, in which case it then becomes a record and requires 2 years? Is that correct?
If it were evidence that were used, we would retain it for as long as we needed it.
Right.
And from 2 years from the end of that point, I think, is the way it would work. If you bring in something to use in an investigation, it's going to be treated differently than the routine stuff that we maybe just keep on an ongoing basis.
Because it could be years before a case gets brought.
Correct.
Yeah, it would be subject to
and dealt with. So
discovery.
you have to keep whatever your evidence is during that whole.
And I mean, the cities has a records retention schedule, and it treats criminal evidence very differently than other things. It goes into the box for that case, and it gets retained for at least 5 years, I think, until after the case is over.
Yes, it would be discovery at that point, and then so the defense and prosecution would have a record of that, and then it would live there.
Right. I guess I'm trying to understand what the distinction is between video and record. If we're calling the video a record, then we have to keep it for 2 years, but I'm hearing you say it's video, not a record, so we only need to keep it for 1.
Well, video's a record. Okay. So that's the first thing. So the general rule for all records is 2 years. There's a specific statute, though, that says if you have a record that is video, ongoing, routine video, you don't have to keep it for 2 years.
Okay.
You can only keep it for 1.
Okay,
you can destroy it after 1 year.
All
Sorry
right,
about
thank
that.
you. No, that's the part I didn't understand. Thank you.
Yes.
And just a follow-up question on this. That section that is the carve-out talks about routine video monitoring being related to regular and ongoing operations of the department, jail observation and monitoring systems, building security recording. It just seems like our ALPR reads are a completely different kind of data than this. And I'm just curious, the jurisdictions who have a shorter records retention period, have they gotten into any trouble for that? Have there been lawsuits?
I'm not aware of any lawsuits or trouble that any agencies have gotten into. I don't know that they're really, I don't know. We didn't really catalog how many agencies. I know there are some agencies out there with shorter policies, but I think the Lexipol policy is 1 year, so most of the agencies do have the 1 year policy.
Personally, if the choice is retain this pretty invasive amount of data for an entire year for everyone who, and these cameras are going to be substantially better than the cameras on the older police cars at reading the plates, which is good. They're going to be able to read lots of lanes. They're going to get a lot more data. if the choice is we're going to upload all of that data and keep it for a year or not record it, I would come down on the side of let's not retain it, because it is such a huge amount of data. And if we had 100% trust that nothing could ever be leaked or or there was no security breaches possible, then I would feel more comfortable. But we've all experienced the fact that data breaches happen, and because of that, I just do not feel comfortable with the trade-off here of retaining it for so long. I'd be willing to be brave and set our retention policy lower, but if we're not willing to do that as a city, then my preference would be to not retain the data.
You know, one thing that occurred to me when I was looking at the report that really that I think bears emphasis is that the data by itself is not, it doesn't, by itself is not personally identifiable. Like, it's just the license plate. You don't know who that's associated with. The only way to know that information would be to match it with the DMV database, and the public doesn't have access to it. So even if there were a leak, it wouldn't really be valuable to anyone.
I think that's
There's there's no personal information
I think
gathered.
that's somewhat naive in an age of big data analysis, where companies are able to uniquely identify people to their location data even without having personally identifiable data.
What I'm just sharing
Yeah.
is that if a system like this was hacked, it would have a bunch of license plate numbers. It would not have people's names, addresses, date of birth, nothing.
It would have where their car was, though, too.
Which would be right in front of their house. You could
Or,
figure out who it was.
or it could be somewhere that they don't necessarily want whoever hacked to know that they were, you know, but yes.
But you'd have to go through an awful lot of data to get that, and you'd have to understand the data files, and you'd have to understand, you know, what those records look like. I mean, you'd have to know an awful lot to
If you
be
were
able to do that.
if you were a bad actor who was purposely attacking this kind of system, you would have the expertise to do that kind of analysis, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, frankly, a better target would be the DMV database, really,
Right.
if someone wants to go after that kind of information. But, I mean, the point's taken, that any database is theoretically hackable. You know, what you can actually do with it, I guess, is open to debate. But
And I would just say, you know, the use of this to identify people involved in protests or that type of thing, I think that's more of the concern, right? It's like, it's not the names, it's the place and the location where you were, I think is the concern, right? Yeah.
But people, when they're typically protesting, are not in their car protesting. They are standing on the street protesting, not driving around in their cars.
No, but if they went to the protest in their car and then parked and they go, I mean, I've been to protests where the police have taken photographs of the people who were there. So I think it's naive to say that there's no, you know, potential surveillance of the cars in the area. And I'm not, you know, that, yeah.
sorry, just
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt someone, but so kind of I guess where we are is, you know, the current state of the law as it's written is that it's a 1-year retention, but as I think was starting to be discussed, it's really kind of a risk conversation. You know, if you can lower the retention somewhat from a year, how much risk does that present the city? I don't know. I'm not, I mean, not that I'm by any means an expert in it, but I'm not aware of any lawsuits. You could also make the reverse case that maybe a civil liberties lawsuit would be the more likely lawsuit, which would be if you hold it too long, probably, you know. But as it stands right now, we're at 1 year, and I don't know if, you know, something, you know, under a year would still work from a law enforcement perspective. Something, you know, between a year and nothing would work, and still, you know, when you're trying to balance the relative data privacy issues versus, kind of the state of the retention law as it is right now, if there's something that would work there.
Could we do something like we have done in other things and collect data for a year and see what is the time frame that we go after? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 6 months? I don't feel like we know. I would feel really bad if we set it low and find out that we're in a situation where we could have solved a really horrendous crime here and we were, you know, kind of jumped to something quickly without more data. And maybe, you know, maybe generally speaking, it's not very valuable to you after, you know, 3 months or 6 months. But without data, I really don't know. I just know that investigations and things having to do with law enforcement seem to take a while to be done with. And so 7 days would be, I mean, you might not even have had someone report something to you within 7 days, and then you don't even have the opportunity. So that would be just, I think, not very prudent for us. So just my thought. Yeah.
So I appreciate all the research you did in the staff report to try to figure out where we're at. And so I'm very reassured that this data is not pooled with all other enforcement agencies to create a really huge database that would be relatively easy for even a police officer somewhere to go and create an easy record of where this person has been for the last year. So I'm relieved about that. I'm relieved that that even our database is only accessible by our police personnel. I certainly understand the concerns about assembling all this data and housing it somewhere, and I worry about that sort of potential. You know, I can certainly create scenarios where that data becoming public would harm somebody. You know, if somebody's out to check on a particular person, they know that person's license plate number. They don't need to match it against a DMV database. So, so I think there are scenarios where release of that information would clearly be harmful. I'm less worried about it, about our data being the source of that information when there are commercial databases out there collected by private parties running these probably very same cameras or very similar cameras on their own devices or their own whatever. So I'm a little less worried that our data is going to be the target of anybody when there's easier ways to get similar data, not quite as detailed as ours probably will be. I would rather set a shorter limit than 1 year. The statute that I think the statute is vague enough that that we'd be okay setting a shorter limit. I wouldn't set it, you know, as short as Vice Mayor Sparks, but I would be quite happy with 3 months or 6 months as a retention. And partly that's just I want to stop the accumulation of huge amounts of database on our citizens, huge amounts of data on our citizens with no clear purpose. And so that's where I'm at now.
So I just want to share that many years ago, I worked in child support investigations, and so my job is to find people. And back in the day, it was so easy to go into DMV, Franchise Tax Board, you know, all these different systems and find people and find their information. So, I mean, good thing I was a good person, but all it takes is somebody to just kind of take this information and can do bad things, or I'm not saying that would happen, but it's just the security of people's information and their privacy and I, like my colleague here, also would agree under a year, maybe 3 or 6 months or something is something I would agree with, because it feels like a year is a lot of information. I think that if the reader did locate something, then you would always already have like a case or a charge or something happening where you would have to retain it. but any other information that's in the cloud, kind of being stored for in case something happens in 9 months, in a year, I feel like it's too long and to be out there. So I would also agree to a lesser time frame than a year.
So, Mayor, we're talking about like experimenting, right? So I'll just do a what if. What if we started the Taser Axon rollout, if approved? What if we did 6 months? And then, as council mentioned, down the road, I'll report out. And I may be telling you, hey, if we would have kept some information longer, we could have solved a significant crime. Or maybe I tell you different. But I don't know. I think maybe council can consider 6 months.
Okay. And also, something Ben said triggered to me. You were talking about people know where you're at your house. I want to remind people that I constantly see the Google car driving around, and it's taking everybody's information wherever they're at and at their houses too, all the time. And I always see those Google cars around. And that's public information that anybody can go on to Google and get. Yes.
I'll just say that the Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches from the government, not from Google. So we have a different standard of how we're going to behave.
That's fine, but just to say that where someone's at, that is out there all the time. Kay, did you?
Well, I mean, Google blurs out license plates, but also I guess I like your idea and your compromise, and I appreciate that. But I wonder, how would you know if you had it for another month, you would have been able to solve it if it's deleted and you don't know what was there anymore, right? Like, how would you know that?
It could come out through an investigation. So say we had a license plate read that expired, and then later, there's so many ways to solve crimes, but we could realize that this person that we didn't know was in our city. We did a license plate read on them and it expired. We didn't know who the suspect was, but then they fueled at our gas station. So, we could figure out things after the fact. We would know. Not always, but sometimes.
So does that make sense? What he's saying is the record was gone, that they were there, but they had receipts from a gas station.
No, I understand, but that doesn't mean that you would necessarily have photographed their license plate, right?
Only if they passed.
Because you would have had to driven past. That's what I'm saying, is like, how would you know?
Only if they drove past them.
There's a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can count on one hand the number of times I pass a police car.
No, I mean, I'm thinking that you could.
I'm just saying there are scenarios.
Right. No, I'm just thinking, I think you could do the positive. We would
figure out that this car was in our jurisdiction after the fact.
Right.
Whether we read the plate or not. I think.
Right, but the point of having retained that, so I see the positive of it, right? Like, you can say, hey, because we had this, we were able to solve this crime. I think the opposite is more challenging to say, because you won't know if you had retained it, and if you had happened to drive by, if you have erased that data, there's no way to know if you did have it before because you have erased it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
I'll just add too that another thing that's just a metric, maybe doesn't directly answer that question, but another metric is we had talked about reporting back to the council on this, including search statistics, and so that might be helpful in sort of understanding how it's actually being used, in addition to the information the chief said.
Yeah, that's kind of a follow-up question I had, because we've had the ALPR system through Vigilant for years. So, I kind of wonder, why do we need to try this for a year and see how it goes, when, couldn't we look back at what we've done with the ALPR system in the years that we've had it and see how effective it's been?
Do we know? Do we know how it's impacted crime solving in Cotati?
Well, we've recovered a lot of stolen automobiles, I know that. And then also, as I pointed out, we've had people that tried to report some things and it wasn't factual. So they've been beneficial, yeah.
Question about the stolen automobiles, is that because the officer got a hit on the hot list, or was it because of the retention of the records somehow?
It's because it's associated with the hot list. Yeah.
So even if we didn't retain the records, we'd still get the benefit of being able to recover the stolen automobiles.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's a vehicle that's in the hot list, if it's currently in the hot list and the officer drives by, it'll flag it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not if you captured it a week ago and then it becomes a flagged vehicle,
Okay, so where are we at?
We already did public comment, right?
We did,
Okay.
didn't we?
Sorry, I got
Yeah,
lost. That was so
I know,
long ago.
that was a long time ago, but yes, I thought we did.
Well, if there's not more discussion, I would make a motion and see where we land. But I'm happy if somebody else would rather. Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I move that we adopt a motion authorizing the city manager to execute a 5-year agreement with Axon for deployment of dash cameras in the police electric vehicles, with the provision that the data retention for the ALPR system be set at 6 months.
I'll second that.
All right. Yes.
May I propose an amendment to the motion? Propose an amendment that we set the data retention at 3 months.
So do we have to have a second on that one? I forget how this goes.
Yeah, you need a second on it, or I guess the motion maker can accept the amendment and just put it into his motion, but.
No, I'm going to leave the motion alone.
Okay. All right.
I would just like to know from the chief what you feel the impact of 3 months versus 6 months would be on crime fighting.
It would give us 3 more months for something bad to happen elsewhere to track it back to Cotati so that we can match up a crime, like I described.
Okay, so we have a standing motion and second, and we did not get, okay, so let's do a roll call vote. I think that'll be the easiest.
Councilmember Rivers,
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what I'm voting on.
The original motion
6
for
months.
6 months.
The
6
amendment
months.
didn't get a second.
Oh, okay. Aye.
Councilmember Lemus,
Aye.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Sparks,
No.
Mayor Harvey.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
I think you're up.
Should we do something fun now? Let's do arts and crafts. All right. So.
Oh, no. We're going to draw our own seal? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting
I'm gonna
that.
put it-
No. Okay. So just I know everyone here is very familiar with the background, but I'll just reiterate some of the key points here. So many years ago, we started work on the seal, but then in conversations with the Federated Indians of Grayton Rancheria, they requested that we no longer continue forward with the fictional Chief Cotati in our city seal. And so given that feedback from our local tribe, we pivoted and then put out a community survey and just asked the community what they thought. So this happened back in August of 2022, and in the survey, the public largely supported a nature-based theme, with music being the second most popular theme. There was also significant public comment encouraging the city to incorporate the hexagon layout into the seal to make it unique to Cotati. In November of 2022, the council reviewed this and the feedback from the public, and also conceptual seal options. And based on the feedback, they basically the council at that time largely confirmed the public feedback, which included the artist's design of the seal based on a nature theme as well as a hexagon shape, and potentially, but also I should say, potentially an element or texture that tie the seal to native history. And then the artist put together some options that were reviewed by the council in February of this year. And I won't go through it all, but there's a bunch of feedback from the council summarized in the packet page on 213. Some of the more nuanced feedback, though, was that it would be nice to add a small, almost like an Easter egg, a rooster on the weather vane on top of the bandstand. The council wanted to see it both in the large format so you can see the detail, but also smaller formats so that you could see what it would look like in its sort of native environment, which would be generally on a like city stationery or a business card. And the council also asked for black and white and also color versions so they could see it in both formats. And then finally, or actually two other things. One is to confirm that the texture or the outside border is actually something that ties back to something like a native basket weave, as was presented, but confirming that was in fact the case. And then finally, looking at it with a hexagon with sharp edges versus the rounded edges that were in the concepts the council was looking at that time. So on packet page 214, there is a picture of a Pomo basket. So that was the sort of the inspiration for the border around the outside, as well as there's also on the walls at the corner of 116 and Old Red. It's incorporated in that wall too. So it has been used previously in a public space after public input on that design, and so that's just confirming that it is a Pomo Indian basket weave. I will just point out, though, that the coastal Miwok tribes also inhabited this area. I don't know if there's a coastal Miwok analog that's exactly the same, but both tribes did generally inhabit this area. And we did try to change some things to make the laguna, which is the river in the center of the logo, look more like a river and less like a pathway, which is one of the things that we'd heard in the prior iteration of this. So the artist did include more rocks and reeds and other things to try to make it look more river-like, very placid, but still river-like. You're not going to whitewater raft down it, but that's appropriate for the laguna. It's a pretty low-grade, river or creek up at the upper end. So in terms of some of the foliage comments, it was hard for, when we looked at different versions with more foliage, it just sort of obscured the main focal points, which were the laguna and the bandstand in the back. And even though there's various versions, I guess the best, sort of small-scale version you can see is on packet page 215. You can see it in color and also in black and white in in that art style that was proposed. So I think that covers all the main points. With that, I just will say that from the staff, at least we recommend the round corner and the Pomo basket weave pattern on the outside. And we think it's a more aesthetically pleasing and also in terms of the basket weave, respective of the native culture. And also definitely invokes a native pattern, even at first glance, even if you're not familiar with how we came up with it. So, and lastly, respects the prior feedback received from the tribe to remove the likeness of the fictional Chief Katati from our logo. And with that, I'll just end it there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can.
So Damien, did staff make a comment on rooster versus no rooster? Because I noticed some have it and some don't.
Oh, so the final versions are on, some of the earlier versions that were included just for reference don't have
Okay.
it yet.
All right.
But the later versions in the packet, and they don't have, and mine at least don't have page numbers, but starting on page 221, that attachment set. Yes, 215 has the small scale, but same graphic, just very small. So you wouldn't be able to see it, right? You wouldn't be able to see the rooster on that level, which is hence the Easter egg concept. You'd see it up there, but you wouldn't see it on the business card.
Well, yeah. Okay, questions? Yes.
Just one question. Did you have any comments from the tribe about the border pattern? Did they give you any feedback?
So I did reach out to them, and I showed it to them, and we discussed it. They were non-committal. They didn't really have an opinion one way or the other. They said if we really wanted to get an opinion on the border pattern through the tribal council, we'd have to formally submit it. And that, it's a very low priority, so we probably wouldn't hear back for a very long time, if ever. Because they're more focused on projects. But they weren't opposed to it, but they also didn't support it. They were just neutral on it.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a couple comments about the just description from Marie McNaughton had emailed the staff about Katati, the village that our town is named after, that the accent mark should go over the A, not between the T and the I. So I'm just going to say that. And then also that the pattern that we have is actually not Coast Miwok, it is Pomo. And this territory, the village of Katati, is Coast Miwok, not Pomo. There was definitely some crossover, and the basket patterns are, relatively similar. Like the Coast Miwok look more like V's, kind of, and the Pomo looks more like triangles. But I think it's fine. I just wanted to have mentioned that. And then the other thing is, you did mention, Chief Katati is fictional, but my understanding, or her understanding, was when it was originally created, it wasn't meant to be a particular person. It was meant to be to symbolize the group of people who were here. And then the Chief Katati idea came up somewhere later. But I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Thank you.
Sylvia? Ben? No? Okay. We will open this up for public comment. There is no one here in the audience. Would you check with our Zoom attendees?
Thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Thank you. Then, Ben, I guess you're up.
Sure. I'll just say, I love where we landed. I think I agree with the staff recommendation of the triangular basket weave border and the versions that are on 221 on the backside, I think will be a huge improvement over our current seal.
Sylvia?
I also agree. I like the one with the Pomo basket weave border, and I'm wondering if our business cards can be reprinted with that on it. Mine is blank.
Yeah, there's going to be business cards and stationery orders after this, if the council approves it.
That means we have collector's items. Okay.
I have one more. Wow, I just forgot what I was going to say.
I don't know. I can't help you. My mind reading skills aren't working. Well, Laura, did you have anything?
Maybe it'll come back to me when Laura's done.
Yeah.
Sure. Just one comment. I showed this around to people in the really small format and asked them what they thought. And some of the feedback I got was that on the color one in particular, it's hard at a glance to see the bandstand, the dark green, and even on the black and white one, the amount of cross-hatching lines, it just at a glance, you don't really notice what that is. So I'm wondering if there's a way to, without completely reinventing the hexagon here, is there a way to, I don't know, maybe lighten up the color of the grass or enlarge the bandstand a little bit so when it's in that real small format, you can see what it is at a glance? No, that's possible.
I mean, lightening the grass would be easy. The bandstand, I don't know, because you'd be changing proportions of things, so I'm not sure if it would still have the same look. But the grass would be easy to change the color of if we want to lighten it a little bit.
Because you're right, in the black and white one, the contrast,
Yeah, it pops out
it
more.
pops out a little bit more, yeah. Agree. Less green grass. A lighter green grass. Drier grass, that's it.
I mean, I agree with that, and I don't really want to see it back at another meeting, so I'm wondering if we can approve it subject to the artist's discretion to increase the contrast between the grass and the bandstand.
And I think the good example is how it does pop out in the black and white one, so whatever contrast. I think I get the gist. Did you remember?
I remembered.
Okay, all right.
It was just, so I have read some comments or had some feedback also about how there was not a choice to keep the original seal or the former seal, and I just want to clarify that that was because when when the city consulted with Grayton Rancheria, they asked us to not use it. And so to honor their request, it was not a choice. That's why it wasn't a choice. So I just want to be clear about that because I've seen some comments about how they weren't given that choice, and that's the reason why. It's to honor the Native people who live here.
That is correct.
That is correct.
All right, then I'd be looking for a motion. Somebody, anybody.
I'll make a motion that we move forward with that image that has the pomo basket weave around with the change to lightening the grass around the bandstand.
Yeah.
I second that motion.
All right.
And sorry, before you guys vote, just to be totally clear, it's just to increase the contrast specifically
correct.
between the bandstand and the field around it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. All right, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we have a new seal. Good job, everybody, yay. And I guess people will get seals on their cars. Okay. Oh, there you go, new name tags too. Okay, see, now you have a collector's item. There you go. So I guess we can move on to the city manager's report.
Yes. Well, one of the things we'll be doing is replacing stationery and name badges, so I can lead with that. Other things that are exciting, it's been getting a lot of positive feedback on, well, just from the community, and as a surrogate of that, the social media that we have is kind of blowing up around Cotati Park. Everyone's very excited to see everything that's going on there. I mean, I'm excited to see it too. There's the 5 to 12-year-old play structure is built. It's not usable yet, but it's built, so you can go out there and see it. The gazebo is constructed, so that's the actual structure itself is ready now. The swings are in and built, and so the next thing they're working on now, the rest of this week, is they're going to be working on the 2 to 5-year-old play structure, and also the adult fitness equipment area. So those are still to be installed, but that's going to be later this week. And then landscaping, and we're looking at by the end of May, early June, it's going to be done except for the bathroom. So the bathroom is prefabricated, as I think you guys know. So that's supposed to come in at the end of June, early July, and then they're literally just going to crane it in, drop it in, and hook it up, and it'll be done. And then we have to have a ribbon cutting. So get your scissors out; it'll be fun. All right. So other projects, as you noticed out here on the street, we have La Plaza, West Sierra Road construction. That's really going to get going. Right now they're doing curb ramps and other preliminary work, but they're going to get going with the paving work. End of May, I believe, is when they're slated to start, and that's also true of the other street reconstruction project, which is out on Myrtle. So they're doing other preliminary work, pathways, road, curb ramps, things like that. But they are using two different construction methods. So this one here is like dig and patch and re-overlay, whereas the one out on Myrtle is complete dig out. So it's going to be dirt roads there for a bit until they repave and rebuild the whole roads. But that's a recycling method that I think you're all familiar with. We've done in other places in the city. All right. And one thing out there on, and this information will be going out shortly, but just to be aware of it, when they start working on the Myrtle project and the pathways, they're going to have to close the park during work hours, so 8 to 5 on weekdays. So there'll be temporarily, at least the access, people won't be able to access it off of Myrtle during that time.
Can they walk in?
I think the answer is probably no. They're not supposed to, because they'd be walking through a construction zone.
Okay.
Eventually, when we do the park improvements there, there'll be another way in through the back across a bridge from the pathway, but that's not obviously built yet. So at this point, the only legitimate access point is off of Myrtle. The only real access point. Yeah, there's kind of like,
Walk through the creek.
Yeah, if you have your boots on, you can get, there are other ways, but yeah. So City Hall repainting, that's supposed to get going mid-June. So that's going to, City Hall, Community Center, Civic Center. That's all going here very soon. And then Pocket Park is done except for the bollard lights, and that's probably going to take some time to get all that sorted out until we do that, and then we'll turn the lights on. Well, let's talk about other things we've already talked about, just to save you guys the time. But we will be coming back with the all-electric reach code in the near future, so probably in the next month or two. Planning Commission and Council will be talking about that again. This past Saturday, we held our annual Cotati Community Yard Sale in the Cotati Room, which was a great success. We had over 200 visitors throughout the day. And we were able to sell a lot of secondhand items to the community at a low cost, which benefits our recreation programs. And the unsold items were donated to the Redwood Gospel Mission to sell in their thrift store to benefit the homeless support programs through Sonoma County. So that's what happens with the stuff that's not sold at ours. We had the first community camp out at the Veranda Floaty Ranch. We had 10 people there, and they stayed the night, and they had lots of campfires. Well, they had a campfire and all the camp activities. It was a good first year. It started small, but we're hoping that, in the second year it gets much bigger. But like a lot of things we're doing out there for the first time, we're just trying them and see how they work. And if we think that they went well, then we'll continue to do them or modify. And it's a continual, ongoing thing that we're doing out there with a lot of different types of programming. Another one is rainwater capture. That workshop was originally supposed to be, I think, this last weekend, but because of rain, got rescheduled to Saturday, May 27th. It's ironic that the rainwater capture workshop gets rescheduled because of rain. But
what's wrong with this picture?
Yeah. Yeah, there's materials that they have to have that they can't, I guess, get rained on. So May 27th, 10 to noon. It'll be rescheduled to that date. We also have our last spring youth, it's a free youth day at the ranch from 3:30 to 5, and that's Mother's Day themed, and there's music, games, crafts, and all sorts of, there's a take-home gift for Mother's Day as well. Walk-ins are welcome, but RSVPs are preferred. We talked about this earlier in the meeting, but 7:30 to 10:30, May 18th, the city is going to be staffing a sort of a SAG station for the Bike to Wherever Day in La Plaza Park. So that's coming up here pretty soon. And then May 19th, we have our Kids Night Out from 5 to 9 at the community center for children ages 5 to 12. And that's to take care of the kids while the parents go do whatever they want for a couple hours. And then we have lots of other stuff that I won't get into now because they're far enough out that we can talk about it at the next meeting. But I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No? Thank you. Then we will move on to city council member reports. Or we want to go first?
Mine's quick. The Cotati Historical Society barbecue was super fun, and we all got to serve chicken to the citizens of Cotati, which was really great. We got to meet a bunch of people and the service auction, and I have heard through the planning committee that it was a very big success financially as well, and am looking forward to working with the person who bid on my genealogy research and helping them break through whatever brick walls they have.
Great. Laura?
I attended the Water Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, May 1st. Two real quick things and then one longer thing. First, the Saving Water Partnership is focusing their messaging on thank you for saving water, trying to acknowledge that people really did reduce their use quite a bit. So I know we're kind of echoing that in our messaging too with our water bill. And then also this is a little sad that the salmon steelhead, the fish counts are really, really low this year, which was surprising to me. We've had so much rain. I thought that would help, but they're very, very low.
Maybe they didn't like it, huh?
Yeah, no. So then a little bit longer thing, there's a new group forming called the Russian River Water Forum, and it is going to be tasked with figuring out what to do about Potter Valley Project. Who ought to control it, who wants to invest in it, how that's going to work to benefit the region. So Mike Thompson came and spoke. He's been coming to meetings, but he spoke about it at this recent meeting. There's going to be a couple moving parts in this. There's going to be a planning group that has 26 members that's all really clearly defined who's involved with it. It's various county folks and tribes and water contractors. So for city government types, there's 6 seats reserved for water suppliers. So 3 of those are from the WACTAC. So just so you know, the representatives on that planning group are going to be Windsor, Santa Rosa, and North Marin Water. Petaluma and Roanoke Park are alternates. The planning group is a technical level group that's going to come up with recommendations, and then that will funnel into the leadership group. The leadership group will be more open to any elected representatives, but their recommendation was that each elected city council, elected bodies would send one representative. So that's just something that will be coming up soon. That group is going to start meeting. The planning group, the technical group is meeting like in a week, like next week, having their first meeting. And then the leadership group is not going to start meeting until late summer, early fall. So we can send somebody to that. It could be me, since I'm on the WACTAC. It could be somebody else, I presume. So we'll have to, I guess, decide if we want to send somebody. That's it. That's my report.
Thank you. Ben?
So from Sonoma Clean Powers Board meeting last week, I'll just report that the governor included in his budget trailer bill this year some provisions that would really cut off CCAs like Sonoma Clean Power at the knees and leave their only power to be setting rates. So removing their ability to purchase power, thus removing Sonoma Clean Power's ability to try to provide clean power, for instance. They would remove all power purchasing ability from CCAs. So there's a lot of lobbying going on right now to try to, because the budget trailer bill, this doesn't belong in a budget bill, but that's where you put things that you don't want to have a full hearing and you try to sneak them through. So a lot of efforts being made to make sure those provisions get a full hearing and aren't snuck through on a budget trailer bill. So that's the big news at Sonoma Clean Power. And the Russian River Watershed Association has, I think it's 20th anniversary coming up on June 1st. Big celebration at the Laguna Foundation.
Thanks. Sylvia?
Okay, so yeah, I also attended the Sonoma Clean Power board meeting on Zoom. So there was a really good legislative update. It also included AB 205, which is a fixed delivery cost by PG&E by 2025, which I think some cities are appealing it to the ombudsman because a fixed costs are going to affect investments and other kind of things. So it's one of the things they brought up. So it was a really good legislative update at the meeting. That was last week. I also last Thursday went to the Generation Housing Summit, and I saw some staff. It was great to see some of the staff there. They had some presenters, including from San Diego Urban Infill, where they had some really kind of out-of-the-box kind of ideas for housing solutions. So that was a really good presentation last Thursday. Today I went to the Cotati Chamber of Commerce, and the few things that are coming up, they have the Cotati Music Festival, June 24th from 12 to 6 p.m., and they will be looking for volunteers, and so I may be volunteering, maybe asking who else is available on June 24th. They also have a couple of other projects that are coming down the pike. They have a Cotati art project where they want to do Cotati art downtown together. I think they're working with Art Start, and maybe do some like native flowers, maybe chickens. They're kind of working with them to find out what kind of art to have down there. And also, Cotati will be the first of a project with this is the Sonoma County Tourism Board. It's called Neighborhood Project, where they're going to do like a video series on Cotati. So we'll be like the first ones in the county to kind of kick off that project. So that's exciting. So I think that's what I have for right now. Okay. RCU, Rotary Credit Union, next Saturday has their shred-a-thon. I look forward to it every year. So if you have stuff to shred.
Good information. Yeah, the Cotati Historical Barbecue was great. It was so nice to see people again, people that you don't get to see very often. And it was nice seeing the community members that we really haven't seen in a few years. So it was great to catch up and serve. So that was great. I attended the LAPCO meeting, and the important thing out of that is we are doing a RFP to work on the disadvantaged unincorporated communities, or AKA DUCs, and that is important for annexation of all of these areas that are disadvantaged, and in particular in the Sonoma Valley and Santa Rosa, it's like Swiss cheese, where there's all these areas that were never annexed. So this study will be really important for that. So looking forward to that. I also attended SCTR CPA yesterday. The big thing was the budget, so they were working on that. And the other thing is they are working on polling for a RCPA for some kind of measure, be it a sales tax measure or a property tax measure. They looked at some other things like TOT and an airport fee and things like that, but as everything got thrown out and looked at, really the only things available to them are property and sales tax. So they're going to be doing some polling. So that, in case you hear about that, they'll be doing that soon. And the most important, or the most sad thing that came out of that meeting is that Suzanne announced that she's going to retire. So she has not picked a date yet, but sometime between October and the end of the year, then Suzanne, who's been there like forever since the beginning of time, will be retiring. So that was kind of sad news, but good for her. So
I forgot one thing. Can I
that's
add
okay.
one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
From Sonoma Clean Power, I should have pointed out, it's not a change, but I should still point it out. We just approved the coming fiscal year's budget, which includes maintaining rates at 5% below PG&E's rates for the first half of the year, with an anticipated reduction for the second half of the year, because Sonoma Clean Power has just about reached its target reserve goal. So it will be able to stop putting as much money into reserves and start reducing rates even further below PG&E's rates.
Great. Anything else? All right, then I would say that, is there any information received after, oh, I'm sorry. we have public comment on non-action agenda items. I don't know why I keep skipping over that one. And no one is here, but would you check with our Zoom attendees?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Harvey. Speaking to our Zoom attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand icon at this time. Mayor Harvey, that'll end public comment.
Okay, and I see someone in the hallway. If they would like to speak on any public comment on non-action agenda items, you can, no? Okay, all righty then. I got that signal. Then we will move on to information received after the agenda was posted.
Yes, there were 4 public comments received since the agenda was posted. Those were published to the web agenda, and they are also available here in print in the chamber.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So with that, I believe we were on to adjournment at 9:28. Thank you, everyone.